They dragged her out of the cellar like spoiled meat headed for the garbage. 23 years she'd lived in darkness, and now her own parents were haggling over her price in a filthy back alley market, trying to sell their daughter to the highest bidder. The broker sneered at her white hair, calling her defective. Her mother wouldn't even look at her. But when a massive shadow fell across that dusty square and a voice like rolling thunder made an offer that froze everyone in place, everything changed. This is the story of the girl they called Cursed and the Alpha King who proved them all wrong. Stay until the end to see how an outcast became a queen. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's get into it. The cellar smelled like earth and old potatoes and something worse. Something that clung to skin and clothes and wouldn't wash away no matter how hard you scrubbed. Alara Snowville had learned that lesson years ago. She'd stopped trying. The darkness was absolute. Not the comfortable darkness of a bedroom at night where moonlight might slip through curtains or a hallway light might glow under the door. This was the kind of darkness that pressed against your eyeballs, that made you forget what colors looked like, that turned hours into days and days into a formless stretch of existence that couldn't really be called living. She sat on the dirt floor with her back against the stone foundation, knees pulled to her chest, listening. Listening was the only thing that broke the monotony. Footsteps above meant her mother was cooking. Heavy boots meant her father was home from patrol. Raised voices meant they were arguing about something, usually about how long they could keep the secret, how much longer until someone discovered what they'd hidden beneath their floorboards for 23 years. Alara didn't remember the sun. She'd been 2 years old when they'd locked her down here, maybe younger. Her earliest memories were all darkness and cold and the rough wooden ladder that led up to the trap door. Once a day, the door would crack open. A hand would lower a bowl of whatever scraps were left from dinner, sometimes water in a dented metal cup. Never enough. Always just enough to keep breathing. She'd learned not to cry out, learned not to beg. The few times she had when she was small and didn't understand yet, the trap door had stayed closed for 2 days straight. Lesson learned. The white hair had been the problem from the start. That's what she'd overheard in fragments over the years, when her parents spoke too loudly or forgot she could hear through the floorboards. In the shadow pine pack, where dark fur and darker eyes were the mark of strength, a white-haired pup was an omen, a curse, a sign of weakness in the bloodline. Her parents had tried to hide it at first, kept her indoors as a toddler, told neighbors she was sickly. But wolf pups grow, and packs have eyes everywhere. When the questions became too pointed, when the pack elders started demanding to see the Snowvale child, her parents made a choice. They told everyone she'd died. Fever, they said. Came on quick. Tragic loss. The pack had mourned politely for an appropriate amount of time, and then life went on. Meanwhile, Alara had been lowered into the cellar, and the trap door had been nailed shut. That was 21 years ago. She'd counted the days at first, scratching marks into the stone with a nail she'd found in the dirt. But eventually the marks blurred together and she lost track, and it didn't seem to matter anymore. Time was meaningless in the dark. She slept when she was tired. She ate when food came. She existed. The only thing that kept her sane was her imagination. In the absolute blackness, she could be anywhere. She invented whole worlds in her head. Forests where white wolves ran free. Mountains where the snow matched her hair and no one stared. Oceans she'd never seen but dreamed about constantly. She gave herself adventures, imaginary friends, a life. But lately, even that had been failing her. The stories were getting harder to conjure. The darkness was winning. Then everything changed. It started 3 weeks ago with a commotion above. More footsteps than usual, voices she didn't recognize. Her father's tone was different, strained, worried. Her mother was crying, which almost never happened. Through the floorboards, Alara caught fragments. New Alpha King. Full census of every pack. Account for every wolf, no exceptions. What are we supposed to do? Hidden for 23 years. Find out, we're dead. The trapdoor didn't open that night, or the next morning. Alara curled in the darkness, heart pounding, not understanding but sensing that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in over 2 decades, the future was uncertain. On the 3rd day, the trapdoor opened. But this time, her father came down the ladder. He'd never done that before. Never once in 23 years had either parent actually entered her prison. Food was lowered. The door was closed. That was the system. Now he stood at the bottom of the ladder, lantern in hand, and the sudden light was so painful that Alara couldn't even open her eyes. She pressed her face against her knees, whimpering. "Get up," her father said. His voice was flat. Not cruel, not kind, just empty. "We're leaving." "Leaving?" Alara's voice came out as a croak. She hadn't spoken to another person in months. "Where?" "Get up and don't ask questions." He grabbed her arm and hauled her upright. She stumbled, legs weak from lack of use, and he caught her roughly. The lantern light swung wildly. She got her first glimpse of the cellar in full illumination. It was smaller than she'd imagined, more pathetic. Just a dirt hole with stone walls and nothing else. He dragged her toward the ladder. She tried to climb, but her muscles wouldn't cooperate. He ended up pushing her from below, barking at her to move faster. When she finally emerged through the trap door into the house, the light from the windows hit her like a physical blow. She collapsed on the kitchen floor, gasping. "Get her up," her mother said from somewhere to the left. Her voice was sharp with panic. "We don't have time for this." Hands pulled a hood over Alara's head, blocking out most of the light. A rough cloak was thrown over her shoulders. Her father yanked her to her feet again and propelled her toward the door. "Where are we going?" Alara managed to ask. "Somewhere you won't be our problem anymore," her mother snapped. They moved quickly through the packlands, her father's grip tight on her arm. Alara stumbled along, hood pulled low, getting brief flashes of a world she'd almost forgotten existed. Trees, sky. Other wolves passing by, going about their lives, not knowing a ghost was walking among them. Her parents didn't speak to her, didn't speak to each other. They just walked with grim determination until the pack borders fell away, and they entered neutral territory. The market square appeared like something from a fever dream. It was a rough place, the kind of border town where packs from different territories came to trade goods they couldn't or wouldn't exchange within official channels. Stalls sold everything from dried meat to stolen jewelry. The crowd was a mixture of wolves, rogues, and a few humans who didn't ask too many questions. Alara's father pulled her into a narrow alley between two stalls. Her mother followed, face hidden behind a scarf. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared around the corner. Alara leaned against the wall, still reeling. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors she'd forgotten existed. Orange, pink, purple. She stared at it through the gap between buildings, transfixed. "Stop gawking," her mother hissed. "Keep your hood up." "I don't understand what's happening," Alara whispered. "You don't need to understand, you just need to—" Her mother cut off as footsteps approached. Her father returned with another man. This one was thin, weasel-faced, with darting eyes that took in everything. He wore mismatched clothes and smelled like tobacco and something chemical. "This her?" the man asked. "This is her," her father confirmed. The broker, because that's clearly what he was, circled Alara slowly. She stood frozen, not understanding but beginning to feel a cold dread seep into her chest. "Pull back the hood," the broker said. Her father hesitated, then reached over and yanked the hood down. The broker's expression went from interested to disappointed in an instant. "White hair?" "It's natural," her mother said quickly. "She's healthy otherwise, strong bloodline." "White hair, pale eyes." The broker shook his head. "That's a hard sell, lady. Most packs won't touch an albino. Bad luck." "She's not albino," her father protested. "It's just unusual coloring. Unusual coloring that'll scare off 90% of buyers." The broker pulled out a cigarette and lit it, considering. "How old?" 23. "Never been in a pack?" "She's been sheltered." The broker laughed, a nasty sound. "Sheltered, right. More like locked away, yeah? I know the signs. Let me guess. You told your pack she died years ago, kept her hidden, and now there's a census coming and you're scrambling to erase the evidence." Alara's parents said nothing. That was answer enough. "Thought so." The broker took a drag and blew smoke in Alara's direction. She coughed, eyes watering. "Here's the problem. You got damaged goods. Weak Omega who's never been socialized. Weird appearance that'll freak people out. And probably traumatized to hell after spending her life in a cellar. I can move her, but not for much." "How much?" her mother asked, voice tight. 200. 200? Her father's voice rose. "That's insulting." That's generous. I'll be lucky to break even. Most of my buyers want strong working omegas or pretty companionship omegas. She's neither. Best case scenario, I find some remote pack that needs bodies and doesn't care about appearance. Worst case, she ends up in one of the labor camps up north. Either way, I'm taking a loss. They haggled. Back and forth, voices rising, while Ilara stood there in the growing darkness and realized with crystal clarity what was happening. They were selling her. Not finding her a new pack. Not helping her start a new life. They were literally selling their daughter like livestock because it was easier than admitting they'd kept her prisoner for 23 years. The cold dread in her chest turned to ice. She looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw no recognition in those eyes. No remorse, no love, just calculation and fear. 300, the broker finally said. Final offer, take it or leave it. Her father exhaled slowly. Fine, 300. Cash only, no trades. Money changed hands. The broker counted it twice, then nodded and turned to Ilara. Come on, girl, you're with me now. He reached for her arm. Wait, a voice said from the mouth of the alley. Everyone turned. A man stood silhouetted against the fading light, tall, broad-shouldered, but it was hard to make out details with the sun behind him. Market's closed, the broker said sharply. Private transaction. Move along. How much did you pay for her? The stranger asked. His voice was deep, calm, with an undertone of something that made Ilara's instincts sit up and take notice. Power. Authority. Danger. None of your business, her father snapped. The stranger stepped into the alley, and the shadows fell away. Ilara's breath caught. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed too broad to fit through a normal doorway. But that wasn't what froze everyone in place. It was his hair, snow white, like hers, like fresh powder on a mountain peak. And his eyes, pale blue, almost silver, catching the last light of day and reflecting it back like ice. An albino alpha. The broker actually took a step backward. Alpha King Frost Crown, he stammered. This is a legal transaction. I asked how much, the stranger, Alpha King Frost Crown, repeated. His eyes were fixed on Ilara, and she couldn't look away. There was something in his gaze she'd never seen before. Recognition, understanding, fury. 300, the broker admitted. You paid 300 for a wolf you then planned to sell into labor camps? Kalen Frostcrown's voice dropped to something dangerous. For someone who shares my own coloring, who is clearly traumatized and malnourished. She's merchandise, the broker protested weakly. I run a legitimate... You run nothing. Kalen pulled a leather pouch from his belt and tossed it to the broker. It landed with a heavy thud. 3,000. The transaction is mine now. The broker's eyes went wide. He grabbed the pouch, looked inside, and whatever he saw there made him go pale. Yes, Alpha King. Of course, she's all yours. Transaction complete. He vanished into the crowd so fast he practically teleported. Kalen turned to Ilara's parents. You're her mother and father. It wasn't a question. Her mother's face had gone white. Her father looked like he might bolt. We did what we had to do, her father said, trying to muster defiance. You don't understand the situation. In our pack, white hair is... I understand perfectly. Kalen's voice could have frozen fire. I understand that you locked your daughter in a cellar for 23 years because you were too cowardly to defend her against superstition. I understand that when faced with the consequences of your cruelty, you chose to sell her rather than admit your crime. I understand that you are failures as parents and as wolves. You can't, her mother started. I can do whatever I want. I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, which includes your pack as of 2 weeks ago, but I won't waste my authority on you. You're not worth it. He turned his back on them dismissively. Leave, before I change my mind about letting you walk away. They left, fast, didn't even look back at Ilara. She stood alone in the alley with this strange, powerful alpha, her mind reeling. Kalen turned to her and his expression softened. What's your name? Ilara, she whispered. Ilara Snowveil. Ilara. He said it carefully, like he was testing the sound of it. I'm Kalen Frostcrown, and I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you have anywhere else to go? She shook her head. Do you want to stay here, in this market, and take your chances? Another head shake. Then I'm offering you a choice, a real choice, not like the ones you've been given before. You can come with me to the Northern Territories. I can offer you safety, food, shelter, and a chance to decide your own future. Or I can give you money and transportation to anywhere you want to go, and you'll never see me again. Whatever you choose, you'll be free. No obligations, no debts. What do you want? Alara stared at him. For the first time in her life, someone was asking her what she wanted. She opened her mouth to answer, and the world tilted sideways. The alley spun. The ground rushed up. Strong arms caught her before she hit the stones, and she heard Kaylin's voice from very far away. When did you last eat? Medic! I need a medic now! Then darkness took her, but this time it felt different. Safe. Warm. When she woke up, she was in a tent. Soft furs beneath her. A lamp glowing in this corner. And sitting beside her bedroll, reading a book with a patience that suggested he'd been there for hours, was the White Alpha King. He looked up when she stirred. There you are. How do you feel? Dizzy, Alara admitted, confused, hungry. The medic said you're severely malnourished, probably anemic, a few other deficiencies. He set the book aside and reached for a covered bowl. I've got broth here. You need to take it slow. He helped her sit up and handed her the bowl. She took a sip and nearly cried. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted, rich, warm, with actual flavor. She drank it too fast and he gently took it away. Slow, he reminded her. You'll make yourself sick. Why are you helping me? The question came out before she could stop it. Kaylin was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed his own white hair back from his face. Do you know what it's like to be born different? To have everyone look at you and see a mistake, a curse, something to fear? Alara nodded slowly. I was born to an alpha family in the far north. White hair, pale eyes, everything that superstition said was wrong. My parents tried to hide me too. When that didn't work, they abandoned me in the snow when I was 5 years old, left me to die. How did you survive? A rogue pack found me. They didn't care about appearance, they cared about strength and survival. They raised me, trained me. When I was old enough, I challenged for leadership and won. Then I challenged the pack that had abandoned me and took that too. Then the next pack, and the next. Now I rule the entire Northern Territories, and every wolf in those lands knows that white hair isn't a curse. It's a mark of the strongest alpha they've ever seen. He met her eyes. I help you because no one helped me, because I know exactly what you've been through, and because the moment I saw you in that alley, I recognized something. What? Strength. His voice was firm. You survived 23 years in a cellar. Do you understand how remarkable that is? Most wolves would have gone mad. But you're still here, still sane, still fighting. That's not weakness, Alara. That's the kind of strength I want in my territory. Alara's throat tightened. She'd never heard anyone talk about her that way. Like she was valuable. Like she mattered. I don't know how to be part of a pack, she said quietly. I don't know how to do anything. Then you'll learn. I've got time and patience. Kaylin stood and moved toward the tent flap. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we leave for the Northern Territories, if you still want to come. I do, Alara said immediately. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face from intimidating to something almost gentle. Good. Sleep well, Alara Snowveal. Your life starts tomorrow. He left her alone in the tent, and for the first time in 23 years, Alara felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope. She finished the broth slowly, savoring every drop. Through the tent walls, she could hear the sounds of the camp, wolves talking, laughing, the crackle of a fire. Normal sounds, pack sounds. Tomorrow, she'd be traveling to a place she'd never seen, with an alpha she barely knew, toward a future she couldn't imagine. But anything, absolutely anything, was better than the cellar. Alara set the empty bowl aside and lay back on the furs. She was still weak, still scared, still broken in ways she didn't fully understand yet. But she was also free. And somewhere in the darkness, as sleep finally claimed her, she thought she could hear the wind calling her north, toward mountains and snow and a home she hadn't known she was looking for. The journey started at dawn. Alara woke to find clean clothes laid out beside her bedroll. Simple traveling gear, but better than anything she'd ever worn. They fit reasonably well, though everything was a bit loose on her thin frame. When she emerged from the tent, the camp was already in motion. Wolves moved with practiced efficiency, breaking down tents and loading supplies onto carts. They were all massive, clearly alphas and strong betas, but none of them stared at her the way she'd expected. A few nodded politely. One older woman smiled and handed her a piece of bread. "Morning," the woman said. "I'm Mara. You must be Alara. The king said you'd be traveling with us." "I am," Alara managed. "Thank you for the bread. Eat up. It's a long road north." Kaelin appeared from between two carts, discussing something with a scarred alpha, who seemed to be his second in command. When he spotted Alara, he excused himself and walked over. "Ready to go?" "I think so." "You'll ride in the lead cart today. Tomorrow, if you're feeling stronger, you can walk, but there's no rush." He gestured toward a sturdy wagon near the front of the convoy. "Mara will keep you company and answer any questions you have. How long until we reach your territory?" 10 days, give or take. Depends on the weather and the roads." He studied her face. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No?" The answer came quickly, surprising her with its certainty. "No second thoughts." "Good." He handed her a canteen. "Drink water regularly. Mara has food in the cart. If you need anything, tell her and she'll get word to me." He started to turn away, then paused. "Alara, thank you for trusting me." Then he was gone, moving to the head of the column and giving orders to move out. Alara climbed into the cart beside Mara, and the convoy began to roll. The first day passed in a blur of new sensations. Sunlight on her face, wind in her hair, the rocking motion of the cart and the steady rhythm of wheels on packed earth. Mara talked periodically about the Northern Territories, about life in Kaelin's pack, about the weather and the road ahead. But she was comfortable with silence too, which Alara appreciated. By midday, Alara's eyes were aching from the light. She'd spent so long in darkness that normal daylight felt overwhelming. Mara noticed and dug a hat out of one of the supply packs. "Here, pull the brim low. You'll adjust in a few days, but there's no point suffering in the meantime." "Thank you." "Mo, don't mention it. We take care of our own." "I'm not really one of yours yet," Alara pointed out. Mara shrugged. "The king claimed you. That makes you pack, far as I'm concerned. Simple as that." Claimed. The word made something flutter in Alara's chest. Not uncomfortable, just intense. They camped that night in a clearing off the main road. Alara helped where she could, though her strength gave out quickly. Kaelin appeared as she was struggling to carry a water bucket and simply took it from her hands without comment, carrying it to the cook fire and returning to find her red-faced with embarrassment. "You're recovering from 23 years of malnutrition," he said bluntly. "No one expects you to carry full water buckets yet. Sit. Eat dinner. That's your job right now." Dinner was a revelation. Roasted meat, vegetables, fresh bread. Alara ate slowly, watching the pack interact around the fire. They were comfortable with each other, joking, arguing about the best route north, sharing stories. A few times, wolves would drift over to greet Kaelin, and he'd introduce Alara casually. "This is Alara Snowveal. She'll be joining us in the Northern Territories." No one asked questions. No one stared at her hair. They just nodded and welcomed her and moved on. It was surreal. After dinner, Kaelin found her sitting a little apart from the group, staring at the stars. They were so bright out here, away from packlands and human settlements. She'd never seen anything like it. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "It's your camp." Doesn't answer the question. "I don't mind." He settled beside her, close enough to talk quietly, but far enough to be respectful. For a few minutes, they just sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire and listening to the pack wind down for the night. "I've been thinking," Kaelin said finally, "when we get to the Northern Territories, you're going to need time to adjust. It's a harsh place, beautiful, but harsh. And you'll be meeting a lot of wolves at once. It might be overwhelming." "I can handle it," Alara said, though she wasn't entirely sure. "I'm sure you can. But I want to make sure you have support. Mara's agreed to be your guide, help you settle in, teach you pack customs, answer questions, if you're comfortable with that." "I am. She's kind. She's also fierce when she needs to be. She'll have your back. Kaylin shifted slightly. I also want you to know that you don't owe me anything. I know I paid for your freedom from that broker, but that doesn't mean I own you. You're free to make your own choices. If you decide the Northern Territories aren't for you, you can leave any time. I'll even provide an escort and supplies. Alara turned to look at him. In the firelight, his white hair looked almost golden, and his eyes were soft. Why would you do that? Why spend so much on someone you don't know? Because he seemed to search for words. Because I wish someone had done it for me. Because every wolf deserves a chance. And because when I saw you in that alley, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. What? Connection. He met her eyes. Like recognizing, does that sound crazy? No. Alara's voice was barely a whisper. It doesn't sound crazy at all. Something passed between them in that moment, something electric and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Kaylin cleared his throat and stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another long day. He walked away quickly, leaving Alara alone with her racing thoughts and a feeling she couldn't quite name spreading through her chest. The days blurred together after that. Each morning they broke camp and traveled north. Each evening they stopped, ate, rested. Alara slowly regained strength. The trembling in her legs faded. The dizziness became less frequent. Mara taught her how to help set up tents, how to pack supplies efficiently, how to read the weather by watching the clouds. Kaylin was always nearby, but not hovering. He'd check on her once or twice a day, making sure she'd eaten, asking if she needed anything, but otherwise let her integrate with the pack at her own pace. The other wolves were welcoming in a gruff, practical way. They didn't coddle her, but they didn't expect more than she could give either. On the 6th day, Alara walked instead of riding in the cart. She lasted about 4 hours before her legs gave out, but Mara called it progress. On the 8th day, she helped cook dinner. The stew wasn't great, but it was edible, and the pack ate it without complaint. On the 10th day, the mountains appeared on the horizon. The Northern Territories, Mara said, following Alara's gaze. Home. They were massive, jagged peaks covered in snow, stretching across the entire northern skyline. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. How far into the mountains do we go? Alara asked. All the way. The capital is in a valley on the far side of the first range, protected from the worst winds, but high enough that most enemies can't reach us easily. Mara grinned. You'll love it. Nothing like the lowland territories. That night, they camped at the base of the mountains. Tomorrow, they'd start the ascent. Alara felt a mixture of excitement and nerves that kept her awake long after the fires died down. She was standing at the edge of camp, looking up at the stars, when Kaylin appeared beside her again. It was becoming a pattern, these quiet moments at the end of the day when the pack was settled and they could just be. Nervous? He asked. A little, she admitted. What if I don't fit in? What if I can't handle the cold or the altitude or... Alara. He turned to face her fully. You survived 23 years in a cellar. You survived your own parents trying to sell you. You survived a lifetime of being told you were cursed. If you can survive all that, you can handle some cold weather and a few curious stares from pack members. How are you so sure? Because I've been watching you for 10 days. You're stronger than you think. Braver than you know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her white hair. And this? This isn't a curse. It's proof that you're extraordinary. Never let anyone tell you different. Alara's breath caught. His hand lingered for just a moment, then dropped away. Tomorrow we go home, Kaylin said quietly. And I really hope, you'll consider staying. Then he was gone again, leaving her alone with racing thoughts and a heart that felt too big for her chest. She touched her own hair, the white strands that had been the source of so much pain. For the first time, she tried to see them the way Kaylin did, not as a defect, not as a curse, as something extraordinary. The thought was terrifying and wonderful all at once. Alara returned to her tent and lay down on the furs, but sleep was a long time coming. Outside, the wind whispered through the mountain passes, carrying the scent of snow and pine and possibility. Tomorrow, Her new life would truly begin. And for the first time since she'd been dragged out of that cellar, Alara Snowveal found herself actually looking forward to the future. The mountain path was steeper than Alara had imagined. Her lungs burned with every breath, the thin air making her dizzy despite the 10 days of recovery. But she refused to ride in the cart. If she was going to arrive in the Northern Territories, she'd arrive on her own feet. Mara stayed close, occasionally steadying her when loose rocks shifted underfoot. "You're doing great," she said encouragingly. Most lowlanders can't handle this altitude on their first climb. "How much farther?" Alara gasped. "See that ridge up ahead? Once we clear that, it's downhill into the valley. Maybe 3 more hours." 3 hours felt like an eternity, but Alara gritted her teeth and kept moving. Around her, the pack navigated the treacherous path with practiced ease. Kalen was at the front of the column, occasionally glancing back to check their progress. Each time his eyes found Alara, she forced herself to stand a little straighter, walk a little stronger. She wouldn't be weak. Not here. Not now. The landscape changed as they climbed higher. Sparse vegetation gave way to bare rock and patches of snow. The wind cut like knives, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Alara pulled her cloak tighter and pushed forward. When they finally crested the ridge, the view stole what little breath she had left. The valley spread out below them like something from a dream. A massive settlement nestled between protective peaks, smoke rising from hundreds of buildings. Even from this distance, Alara could see the organized layout. Strong defensive walls, training grounds, what looked like a central longhouse that dwarfed everything around it. Beyond the settlement, pristine wilderness stretched in every direction, untouched and magnificent. "Welcome to Frostholm," Kalen said, appearing beside her. Pride colored his voice. "Capital of the Northern Territories. Your new home, if you'll have it." "It's beautiful," Alara whispered. "It's harsh, but it's honest. No one here cares about appearance or bloodlines or superstition. If you can survive the winter and pull your weight, you're pack. That's the only rule that matters." The descent was easier than the climb, though Alara's legs were shaking by the time they reached the valley floor. Word of their arrival had apparently spread, because wolves were gathering along the main road leading into Frostholm. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. And they were all staring. Alara's stomach knotted. She pulled her hood up instinctively, trying to hide. "Don't," Kalen said quietly, reaching over to push the hood back down. "Let them see. Let them know exactly who you are." "They're staring." "Of course they're staring. They've never seen anyone like you. Like us." He raised his voice so the gathered crowd could hear. "This is Alara Snowveal. She travels under my protection and will be given all the rights and privileges of pack membership. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The crowd murmured, but no one spoke up. A few wolves actually bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Others whispered to each other, but the hostility Alara had expected never materialized. They passed through the settlement gates and into Frostholm proper. The streets were wide and well-maintained, buildings constructed from timber and stone that could withstand brutal winters. Wolves went about their business, trading goods, training in open courtyards, repairing equipment. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. Kalen led them to the central longhouse, a massive structure with carved beams and a roof that seemed to touch the sky. Inside, the main hall could have held 500 wolves comfortably. Furs and weapons decorated the walls. A huge fireplace dominated one end, already blazing against the mountain cold. "Mara will show you to your quarters," Kalen said. "Get cleaned up, rest, eat. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out where you fit in around here." "Where I fit in?" Alara echoed. "Everyone contributes. That's how we survive up here. We'll find something that suits your skills and interests. But that's a tomorrow problem. Today, just settle in." Mara led Alara through a maze of corridors to a small but comfortable room in the residential wing. It had a real bed with clean blankets, a window that overlooked the training grounds, and a small fireplace already laid with wood. "This is yours," Mara said. "Private space. Lock on the door. No one comes in without your permission, and that includes the Alpha King himself. That's pack law." Alara stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed. Her own space, her own bed, a door she could lock from the inside. "There's a bathhouse down the hall," Mara continued. "Hot springs feed it, so the water's always warm. Dining hall is on the ground floor, serves 3 meals a day plus snacks. You're welcome to any of it. There's also a healer's station, a library, training grounds, and about a dozen other facilities. I'll give you a full tour tomorrow. Mara? Ilara's voice was small. Why is everyone being so nice to me? The older woman smiled. Because that's what pack means up here. We take care of each other. Simple as that. She moved toward the door, then paused. Fair warning, though, not everyone's going to be immediately welcoming. Some of the older wolves are pretty set in their ways. There might be some grumbling about the Alpha King bringing in an outsider, especially one with unique features. Don't let it get to you. They'll come around once they see you're serious about being here. After Mara left, Ilara sat on the bed and just breathed. The room was warm. The bed was soft. Through the window, she could see mountains painted gold by the setting sun. This was real. This was happening. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Maybe she'd been broken too thoroughly, or maybe she was just too overwhelmed to process it all yet. Eventually, hunger drove her out of the room and down to the dining hall. It was crowded and loud, wolves of all ages gathering for the evening meal. Ilara hesitated in the doorway until a young Omega waved her over to an empty seat at one of the long tables. You're the new arrival, right? Ilara? The Omega had kind eyes and an easy smile. I'm Finn. Sit. Food's better when it's hot. Ilara sat cautiously. Around her, conversation flowed without pause. Wolves discussed the day's work, argued about training schedules, made plans for tomorrow. A few glanced her way curiously, but most were too absorbed in their own lives to pay her much attention. Dinner was hearty: roasted venison, root vegetables, thick bread, and something that might have been berry pie. Ilara ate slowly, savoring every bite, still half convinced this was all a dream and she'd wake up back in the cellar. So where are you from? Finn asked conversationally. South, Ilara said vaguely. Shadow Pine territory. Long journey. What made you come north? Ilara hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she also wasn't ready to tell the truth. I needed a fresh start. Finn seemed to sense her reluctance and changed subject smoothly. Well, you picked a good place for it. Frostholm's intense, but it's home. You'll see. After dinner, exhaustion hit like a physical blow. Ilara dragged herself back to her room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed without even undressing properly. Sleep came instantly, deep and dreamless. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of training exercises from the grounds below. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, a flutter of anticipation. First day. She found the bathhouse and spent longer than necessary just luxuriating in hot water. Then clean clothes. Someone had left several outfits in her room overnight, all in her size. Then breakfast in this dining hall, where Finn waved her over again and introduced her to a half-dozen other young wolves. Mara collected her after breakfast for the promised tour. They walked through the entire settlement, Mara pointing out key locations and explaining how things worked. The smithy where weapons and tools were forged. The healer's station run by a stern older wolf named Greta. The training grounds where warriors practiced daily. The library housed in a smaller building near the longhouse. Do you know how to read? Mara asked. Yes. My mother taught me when I was very young before... Ilara trailed off. Before they locked you away? Ilara's head snapped up. How do you... The Alpha King told his inner circle what happened to you. Not the details, just enough that we'd understand why you might need extra support. Mara's expression was gentle. Don't worry. It won't go beyond those who need to know. But I wanted you to know that I know, so you don't have to pretend around me. Something tight in Ilara's chest loosened slightly. Thank you. They continued the tour, ending at a smaller training area behind the main grounds. A dozen wolves were there, working through combat drills with an intensity that made Ilara nervous. This is where most newcomers start, Mara explained. Basic defense training. Even if you never become a warrior, everyone in the Northern Territories needs to know how to protect themselves. The wilderness up here doesn't care if you're a fighter or not. I don't know how to fight. Then you'll learn. Kael runs the beginner sessions. He's tough, but fair. Mara checked the sun's position. Speaking of which, there's a session starting in about 10 minutes. Want to jump in? Ilara's first instinct was to refuse. But something in her, Maybe the part that had survived the cellar, maybe something new, pushed back against the fear. Yes, Mara grinned. That's the spirit. Kyle turned out to be a massive beta with scars across his arms and a permanent scowl. He looked Alara up and down when Mara introduced her, his expression unreadable. You ever thrown a punch? He asked bluntly. No. You ever been in a fight? No. Can you run a mile without collapsing? I don't know. Kale sighed heavily. Great, another project. But there was no real malice in his voice. Fine. You'll start with conditioning. Build up your strength and stamina before we move to actual combat training. That work for you? Yes, sir. Don't call me sir. Kale's fine. He pointed to the edge of the training area. 10 laps around the perimeter. Walk if you have to, but keep moving. Go. Alara ran, or tried to. Her legs gave out halfway through the second lap. She walked the rest, face burning with embarrassment as the other trainees easily completed their own exercises. But when she finished, dead last, gasping for air, Kyle just nodded. Tomorrow, you'll do 12 laps. Dismissed. That set the pattern for the next 2 weeks. Every morning, Alara reported to training. Every morning, she pushed her body to its limits and beyond. Kyle was merciless, but not cruel. When she fell, he told her to get up. When she wanted to quit, he reminded her why she was there. When she succeeded at something, even something small, he acknowledged it with a brief nod that felt like high praise. Slowly, painfully, she got stronger. The rest of her days were spent exploring the settlement, helping with small tasks wherever she could, and trying to find her place. She assisted in the kitchens, worked in the library, reorganizing shelves, even spent a day helping the healers prepare medicines. But everywhere she went, she felt the whispers, the stares. Most wolves were polite to her face, but she caught the sidelong glances, heard the murmured conversations that stopped when she approached. Albino Omega. Doesn't belong here. Pity case. Alpha King's pet project. It stung more than she wanted to admit. These wolves hadn't locked her in a cellar, hadn't sold her, but they still looked at her like she was other, broken, wrong. Kalen noticed. Of course he noticed. Ignore them, he said one evening when he found her sitting alone in the library. They'll come around. What if they don't? Then they're fools, and their opinion doesn't matter. He sat down across from her. You're doing well in training. Kyle says you've got determination. Kale says I'm slow and weak. He says that to everyone. If he really thought you were hopeless, he'd tell you to quit. The fact that he keeps pushing you means he sees potential. Alara wanted to believe him, but the doubt had been carved too deep over too many years. What if I don't belong here? What if I'm just fooling myself? Do you want to belong here? Yes. Then you will. It's that simple. Kalen leaned forward. Alara, I've been watching you for 2 weeks. You show up every day, you try. You push through pain and exhaustion and self-doubt. That's what belonging looks like. The rest will follow. His confidence in her was almost painful. She wanted to live up to it so badly it scared her. The Pack Council is meeting tomorrow, Kalen said, changing subjects. They want to formally acknowledge your presence and assign you a role. It's standard procedure for new members. A role? Every wolf contributes based on their skills and interests. Some are warriors, some are hunters, some are craftsmen, healers, teachers. We'll figure out what suits you best. The next day, Alara found herself standing in the main hall before a semicircle of older wolves who made up Kalen's council. They were all powerful, experienced, and more than a little intimidating. Kalen sat at the center, formal and commanding in a way she hadn't seen before. Alara Snowveal, he began, you've been with us for 2 weeks. In that time, you've trained with Kyle, assisted various pack members, and conducted yourself with respect. The Council has convened to formally recognize you as a member of the Frostholm Pack and assign you a role within our community. One of the older Council members, a gray-haired woman named Thora, spoke up. We've reviewed your activities and consulted with those you've worked with. While you show promise in several areas, we believe you would be best suited to a support role, perhaps in the kitchens or as an assistant to the healers. Alara's stomach sank. Support role. They were being polite, But the message was clear. She wasn't strong enough for anything more important. Another council member nodded. Given your unique circumstances, a quieter position would allow you to contribute without drawing undue attention. With all due respect, Mara said from where she stood along the wall, Alara's been training hard. Dismissing her to a background role before she's had a real chance seems premature. She's been training for 2 weeks, Thora countered. Most warriors train for years before they're considered competent. We're not dismissing her. We're being realistic about her capabilities. The discussion continued, voices rising as council members debated her future like she wasn't even there. Alara stood frozen, feeling small and useless. Enough, Kaylin's voice cut through the argument. Alara, what do you want to do? Everyone fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Her throat was dry. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to speak. I want to keep training. I want to learn to fight, to hunt, to defend this pack. I know I'm behind. I know I'm weak right now, but I can get stronger. I just need time. You want to be a warrior? Thora's tone was skeptical. You can barely complete basic conditioning drills. Then I'll train harder, longer. Alara lifted her chin, meeting the older woman's gaze. I survived 23 years alone in the dark. If I can survive that, I can survive this. Thora's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Maybe respect. Maybe just surprise that Alara had spoken up at all. The girl has spirit, another council member observed. That counts for something. Kaylin looked around the circle. I propose we give her 3 months. Continue training with Kael, intensified schedule. At the end of 3 months, we reassess. If she's shown sufficient progress, she joins the warrior ranks. If not, we find another role. Agreed? One by one, the council members nodded. Even Thora, though she looked reluctant. 3 months, Kaylin confirmed. Alara, you'll train every morning and afternoon with Kael. You'll also begin learning tracking and wilderness survival from our hunting parties. It won't be easy. I don't need easy, Alara said. I need a chance. Then you've got it. The council dismissed, and Alara walked out of the hall with her heart pounding. 3 months. 90 days to prove she was more than a broken omega, more than an albino charity case. She found Kael on the training grounds and told him about the council's decision. He grunted. 3 months, that's nothing. Most warriors train for years. So I'll train harder than anyone else. Kael studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're signing up for? I'm going to push you until you break. That's my job. I've already been broken, Alara said quietly. I'm still here. Push as hard as you want. Something changed in Kael's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. All right, we start tomorrow at dawn in Snowvale. Bring everything you've got. You're going to need it. That night, Alara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every muscle aching, her mind racing. 3 months. 90 days. It felt like both an eternity and no time at all. She thought about the cellar, about the darkness, about the girl who'd existed there for 23 years with no hope and no future. That girl was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had chosen to fight instead of hide, someone who looked at impossible odds and said yes anyway. Alara closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her. Tomorrow would hurt. The day after would hurt worse. But she'd survived worse than pain. She'd survived being nothing. Now she was going to prove she could be something. The real training began the next morning. Kael had apparently taken her declaration seriously, because the conditioning routine he put her through made the previous 2 weeks look like gentle warm-ups. 20 laps, then 100 push-ups, then weapon drills. Move! Alara ran until her lungs burned and her legs turned to liquid. She collapsed twice. Both times, Kael stood over her and waited until she dragged herself back up. Pain is temporary, he said flatly. Weakness is a choice. Get moving. After conditioning came combat basics. Kael handed her a wooden practice staff and showed her 3 defensive stances. Then he attacked her. Slowly at first, giving her time to process. But even slow, he was overwhelming. She blocked maybe 1 strike in 10. Again, he said every time she failed. By midday, she could barely lift the staff. Her arms were covered in bruises. Her hands were bleeding from gripping the rough wood too tight. "We're done for today," Kale finally said. "Same time tomorrow." Alara stumbled to the dining hall, forced herself to eat, then collapsed in her room for a few hours of desperate sleep before evening training with the hunting party. The lead hunter was a lean, scarred woman named Vera, who had even less patience than Kyle. She took Alara out into the wilderness beyond Frostholm's walls and immediately started pointing out tracks, broken branches, signs of game. "See this?" Vera indicated a barely visible mark in the snow. "Elk. 3 of them. Passed through here this morning, heading east." Alara squinted at the snow. She couldn't see anything. "How do you learn or you starve? Look closer." For 2 hours, Vera drilled her on tracking fundamentals. By the time they returned to Frostholm, Alara's head was spinning with information about hoofprints and scat and wind patterns. She fell into bed that night and didn't even remember her head hitting the pillow. The days blurred into a brutal routine. Morning training with Kyle, afternoon tracking with Vera, evening study of pack law and wilderness survival with Mara. Then collapse, sleep, wake up, repeat. Her body rebelled constantly. Muscles she didn't know she had screamed in protest. Old injuries from years of malnutrition flared up. She vomited after training more than once. Her hands developed calluses that tore and bled and slowly hardened, but she kept showing up. 3 weeks in, something shifted. She completed Kale's morning conditioning routine without collapsing. He noticed, gave her a brief nod, and immediately increased the difficulty. 5 weeks in, she blocked 3 strikes in a row during combat drills. Kale actually smiled, a quick flash that disappeared immediately, but she'd seen it. 7 weeks in, she successfully tracked an elk through half a mile of rough terrain and pointed out its hiding spot to a grudgingly impressed Vera. The whispers around the settlement started to change tone. Instead of pity or dismissal, she caught notes of surprise, speculation. A few wolves started nodding respectfully when she passed, but not everyone was pleased with her progress. Alara was walking back from evening training when 3 young warriors blocked her path. She recognized them from the advanced combat classes, skilled fighters who'd been with the pack for years. "Look who thinks she's a warrior now," the lead one said. His name was Garrett, and he had a reputation for aggression. The Alpha King's pet albino. Alara's heart rate spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. "Excuse me, I need to pass." "I don't think so." Garrett stepped closer. "You've been here 2 months and you think you can just walk into our ranks? You don't belong here, freak." "The Alpha King says she does," one of his companions pointed out nervously. "The Alpha King made a mistake. She's weak, broken. Look at her, probably can't even throw a real punch." Garrett's eyes glittered with malice. "I think someone should test her before the council review. Make sure she's actually worthy." "Get out of my way," Alara said quietly. "Make me." Time seemed to slow down. Alara knew she should walk away, find Kyle or Mara or someone in authority. This was a trap designed to make her look weak or violent. Either outcome would hurt her standing. But something in her, the part that had survived the cellar, the part that had been growing stronger every day, refused to back down. "Fine," she said, and threw the first punch of her life. It wasn't a good punch. Her form was terrible, her power limited, but it connected with Garrett's jaw hard enough to snap his head to the side. For a heartbeat, everyone froze in shock. Then Garrett roared and lunged at her. Alara barely got her guard up in time. His fist drove into her shoulder with enough force to spin her around. She stumbled, caught herself, and came back with a wild swing that missed completely. "Is that all you've got?" Garrett taunted, circling her. "Pathetic." He attacked again, faster this time. Alara tried to block like Kyle had taught her, but Garrett was too experienced. His strikes came from angles she couldn't anticipate. Within seconds, she was bleeding from a split lip and her ribs were screaming. But she didn't go down. She kept moving, kept trying, even as it became clear she was completely outmatched. "Stop!" The command rang out across the courtyard like a thunderclap. Kalen strode into view, his expression darker than a winter storm. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Garrett immediately backed away, hands raised. "Alpha King, You were just assaulting a pack member who's under my personal protection." Kalen's voice was deadly quiet. "In front of witnesses. After she asked you to let her pass. She threw the first punch. After you blocked her path and insulted her. Kaylin turned to Garrett's companions. Is that accurate? They both nodded quickly, apparently deciding that honesty was safer than loyalty to Garrett. Kaylin looked at Garrett with something close to disgust. You're suspended from the warrior ranks for 3 weeks. If I catch you harassing anyone again, the suspension becomes permanent. Understood? Garrett's face went purple with rage, but he bit out a yes, Alpha King, and stalked away, his companions hurrying after him. Kaylin turned to Alara. Blood was dripping from her lip, and she was pretty sure her ribs were bruised if not cracked, but she held his gaze steadily. Are you all right? He asked, his tone softening. I'm fine. You're bleeding. I'm still fine. Something that might have been pride flashed in his eyes. Come on, let's get you to the healers. As they walked toward the healer station, Alara became aware that the entire courtyard was watching. Word would spread quickly. The albino Omega had stood up to a warrior 3 times her skill level and hadn't backed down. She wasn't sure if that would help or hurt her reputation. But in that moment, with adrenaline still singing through her veins and her ribs throbbing with every breath, she realized she didn't care. She'd fought back. For the first time in her life, someone had tried to hurt her and she'd fought back. It felt incredible. The healer's station was quiet at this hour, just the crackle of fire and the sharp scent of medicinal herbs. Greta took one look at Alara's face and pointed wordlessly to a bench. Kaylin stayed near the door, arms crossed, radiating barely controlled fury. Ribs, Greta announced after a brief examination, her fingers probing Alara's side with practiced efficiency. Bruised, not broken. You're lucky. That boy hits like a sledgehammer. I noticed, Alara said through gritted teeth as Greta wrapped her torso with binding cloth. You shouldn't have engaged him, Kaylin said, his voice tight. You should have walked away and found help. I did walk away. He blocked my path. You threw the first punch. Because he wasn't going to let me leave without proving something. Alara met his eyes. What was I supposed to do? Run crying for protection? That would have finished my credibility permanently. Better your credibility than your ribs. My ribs will heal. My reputation might not have. Greta made a noise that might have been agreement or disapproval, hard to tell with her. She finished the binding and handed Alara a small vial. Willow bark extract, 2 drops in water before bed. It'll help with the pain and swelling. Thank you. After Greta left them alone, Kaylin moved closer. His anger had faded, replaced by something more complex. Concern, frustration, maybe pride. You know you didn't have to prove anything to him. Yes, I did. Not to him, to everyone watching, to myself. Alara stood carefully, testing her range of motion. Everything hurt, but nothing was unbearable. I spent 23 years being powerless. I'm done with that. Forever. Something shifted in Kaylin's expression. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tilted her chin up to examine the cut on her lip. His touch was surprisingly gentle for someone so powerful. You're bleeding again, he murmured. I'll heal. They were standing very close now, close enough that Alara could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the pale blue of his eyes darken with something she couldn't quite name. The air between them felt charged, electric. Alara, he started, his voice rough. The door burst open. Mara rushed in, breathless. Alpha King, we have a problem. The outer patrol just returned. They found tracks. Kaylin stepped back immediately, the moment breaking. What kind of tracks? Rogue pack. At least 20 wolves, maybe more, moving south through the high passes, headed straight for Frostholm. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kaylin's entire demeanor changed, shifting from the man who'd been touching Alara's face to the Alpha King who ruled the harshest territory in the north. How far out? 2 days, maybe 3. They're moving fast. Gather the council. War room. Now. He turned back to Alara. Get some rest. We'll talk later. Then he was gone, Mara trailing after him, leaving Alara alone with her aching ribs and a strange hollow feeling in her chest. She made her way back to her room slowly, every step a reminder of the fight. The settlement was buzzing with activity now, wolves moving with purpose, weapons being checked, supplies being organized. Whatever was coming, Frostholm was preparing for it. Alara lay down carefully on her bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process the last hour. The fight with Garrett. Kaylin's fury. That moment in the healer's station when he'd been so close she could have counted his heartbeats. And now, apparently, a rogue pack was heading straight for them. She must have dozed off despite the pain because she woke to darkness and voices in the hallway outside her room. Not threatening, just wolves moving past, discussing patrol schedules and defensive positions. She got up, wincing, and opened her door. Finn was walking past and stopped when he saw her. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a very angry warrior. What's happening?" "Emergency council meeting. The rogues are a bigger threat than we thought. They've been raiding settlements along the border for weeks. Frostholm might be their next target." Finn glanced around and lowered his voice. "There's talk of evacuating the non-combatants, sending them deeper into the mountains until this is over." "When has that ever worked?" Ilara asked. "The mountains are more dangerous than any rogue pack." "That's what some of the council are saying, too. It's a whole thing." Finn shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I should go. I'm on supply duty. But if you need anything..." "I'm fine, thanks, Finn." "Thanks." After he left, Ilara stood in her doorway for a long moment, listening to the organized chaos of a pack preparing for war. Then she made a decision. She got dressed, bound her ribs tighter with spare cloth, and headed for the war room. The guard at the door tried to stop her. "Council members only." "I need to speak with the Alpha King." "He's in a meeting." "I know. That's why I'm here. It's important." The guard looked uncertain, then apparently decided it wasn't worth arguing about. "Wait here." He disappeared inside. A moment later, Kaelin emerged, looking exhausted and stressed. "Ilara, what are you doing out of bed?" "I had an idea about the rogues. Unless it involves you resting and healing, I'm not interested right now. Just hear me out, please." He studied her face, then sighed. "You have 2 minutes. The council is debating evacuation, right? Sending non-combatants into the mountains? How did you... Never mind. Yes, some members think it's the safest option. It's not. The high passes are deadly this time of year. Early winter storms, thin ice, limited shelter. You'll lose more people to exposure than you would to a rogue attack." Ilara took a breath, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "But what if there was another option? What if we used the mountains as a weapon instead of a refuge?" Kaelin's eyes sharpened. "Explain." "The rogues are moving fast because they're using the main pass, the same route we took to get here. It's the only path that can accommodate a large force. But there are smaller trails, aren't there? Paths that only a few wolves could navigate at a time." "Several. Why?" "Because if you can force them onto those narrow trails, you take away their numbers advantage. A rogue pack of 20 wolves is dangerous. But 20 wolves in single file through a mountain pass? That's just 20 separate targets." Ilara could see the idea forming in Kaelin's mind. "You set up ambush points along the narrow sections. Pick them off in small groups. Make the mountain do half your work." Kaelin was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and called back into the war room. "Vera, get in here." The lead hunter appeared a moment later, saw Ilara, and raised an eyebrow. "This better be good. We're in the middle of..." "How many of the alternate mountain passes could accommodate sustained combat?" Kaelin interrupted. Vera's tactical mind immediately understood where he was going. 3, maybe 4. The Snow Serpent Trail, the Widow's Path, definitely the Knife Ridge Run. Why? Could we force an approaching force onto those trails? Block the main pass somehow? Rockslide would do it. We set charges at the weak points, bring down enough stone to make the main route impassable. Vera's eyes were gleaming now. They'd have to take the alternates or turn back. And if we're waiting for them on those narrow trails... "It's a massacre," Kaelin finished. He looked at Ilara with something like awe. "How did you think of this?" "I spent 23 years in a small space learning that sometimes being trapped works both ways. Sometimes the cage becomes the trap for whoever put you there." She managed a small smile. "Besides, Vera's been teaching me about terrain advantages. I've been paying attention." Vera actually laughed. "I'll be damned. The Omega has teeth." She looked at Kaelin. "It could work. It's risky. If we mistime the rock slide or they split their forces. But it's better than either a direct confrontation or a mountain evacuation. Get Kael and Thora. We're revising the defensive plan." Kaelin put his hand on Ilara's shoulder. Brief, warm, grounding. Good work." Then he was gone, swept back into the war room with Vera, and Alara was left standing in the hallway with the guards staring at her with new respect. She returned to her room, but sleep was impossible now. Her mind was racing, playing out scenarios, imagining the battle to come. She'd never been in a real fight until tonight. The idea of actual warfare, of wolves trying to kill each other, was both terrifying and strangely abstract. The next morning, Frostholm was transformed. Every able-bodied wolf had a role. The warriors were checking weapons and armor. The hunters were preparing the mountain trails for ambush. Support staff were stockpiling medical supplies and securing the settlement's defenses. Alara found Kyle in the armory, sharpening blades with methodical precision. He looked up when she entered. "Heard you picked a fight with Garrett," he said flatly. "He started it. And you finished it by getting your ass kicked." But there was no criticism in his tone. "Also heard you came up with the canyon ambush strategy. Is that what they're calling it? Better than suicide mission, which is what the original plan was." Kyle set down the whetstone. "Your ribs good enough to hold a weapon?" "I'll manage." "That's not what I asked." Alara met his eyes. "I'm not sitting this out, Kyle. I can fight. Maybe not well, but I can fight." He studied her for a long moment, then pulled a short sword from the rack. "This is lighter than standard issue. Better balance for someone your size. Take it." The sword was beautiful, simple, functional, deadly. Alara took it carefully, testing the weight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If you die using that blade, I'm going to be pissed." Kael grabbed his own weapons and headed for the door. "We leave at dawn tomorrow. Get whatever rest you can tonight. You're going to need it." That evening, Kaelin called for a gathering in the main hall. Every wolf in Frostholm who wasn't on patrol duty packed inside. The atmosphere was tense but determined. Kaelin stood before them, commanding and confident. "By now you've all heard about the rogue pack approaching our territory. 20-plus wolves with a reputation for brutality and no regard for pack law. They've been raiding settlements, killing indiscriminately, taking whatever they want." The crowd murmured angrily. "They think Frostholm will be easy prey because we're isolated, because the harsh land makes us vulnerable." Kaelin's voice rose. "They're wrong. We're not vulnerable. We're hardened. We're not isolated. We're unified. And this land isn't our weakness. It's our greatest weapon." He laid out the plan, the rock slide that would block the main pass. The ambush points along the narrow trails. The backup forces ready to respond if anything went wrong. It was risky, but it was smart, and everyone could see it. "This is our home," Kaelin finished. "We've built something here that the Lowland Pack said was impossible. A territory where strength and loyalty matter more than bloodlines or appearance, where every wolf has value. We will not let rogues destroy what we've created. We will defend Frostholm, and we will win." The hall erupted in howls of agreement. Warriors beat their fists against the tables. The sound was deafening and primal and strangely beautiful. Alara found herself howling too, caught up in the collective energy. For the first time, she felt like part of something bigger than herself. Part of a pack. Part of a family. After the gathering dispersed, she made her way outside, needing air. The courtyard was quieter now, wolves heading to their quarters to prepare for tomorrow's deployment. "Alara." She turned to find Kaelin approaching. He looked tired but resolute. "Shouldn't you be planning strategy with the council?" she asked. "Strategy's done. Now it's just execution." He stopped beside her, both of them looking up at the stars scattered across the black sky. "I wanted to talk to you before tomorrow." "About what?" "About you staying here, in Frostholm. Safe, while the warriors handle the rogues." Alara's stomach dropped. "No. You're still recovering from Tish." "No," she repeated, more forcefully. "I'm going. I'm fighting. This is my home now too, and I'm not hiding while everyone else risks their lives." "You're not trained for this kind of combat. You could get killed." "So could anyone. So could you." Alara turned to face him fully. "You told me that I belonged here because I chose to fight, because I showed up every day and pushed through the pain and proved I was serious. Was that a lie?" "Of course not. Then don't take this away from me. Don't put me back in a cage, even a safe one, and tell me it's for my own good. I've spent my entire life being protected from the world by people who were really just protecting themselves. I won't do it again." Kaylin's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd pull rank, order her to stay, and that would be the end of it. But then something in his expression softened. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you, but you don't need protection. You need trust." "I do need trust, and I also need—" Alara trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. What did she need? What was this feeling that bloomed in her chest every time he looked at her like that? "What?" Kaylin asked, stepping closer. "What do you need?" The space between them felt impossibly small. Alara could feel her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. "I need to know I'm not imagining this. The way you look at me sometimes. The way I feel when you're close. I need to know if that's real or if I'm just broken and confused and—" He kissed her. It was sudden and gentle and completely overwhelming. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious, and his lips were warm against hers. The world narrowed to just this moment. The taste of him, the way he held her carefully, like he was afraid she might shatter. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "It's real," Kaylin said, his voice rough. "It's been real since the moment I saw you in that alley. I just didn't want to push, didn't want to take advantage when you were vulnerable and confused, and this time Alara kissed him, less gentle, more certain. She fisted her hands in his shirt and pulled him down to her level, ignoring the protest from her ribs because this mattered more than pain. When they finally broke apart, Kaylin rested his forehead against hers. "If anything happens to you tomorrow, nothing will happen. If it does, then I'll have died fighting for something I chose, for a home I claimed, with people I—" She stopped, the word catching in her throat. Too soon. Too much. But Kaylin smiled like he heard it anyway. "After tomorrow, when this is over, we need to talk. Really talk. About what this is. What it could be. I'd like that." They stood together in the darkness for a few more stolen moments. Then duty called him away, last-minute preparations, final checks, and Alara was alone again. But she didn't feel alone. She felt awakened, alive, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Tomorrow, she'd face her first real battle. She might die. She was untrained, inexperienced, and still healing from a fight she'd barely survived, but she was also done being afraid. The convoy left at dawn. 50 warriors, including Alara, plus 24 support staff to handle medical care and supply lines. They moved quickly through the valley and into the foothills, following trails that Alara had learned during her tracking sessions with Vera. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. One team would plant charges at the weak points in the main pass. When the rogues were close enough, they'd trigger the rock slide and force the enemy onto the narrow alternate trails. Then the ambush teams, positioned at strategic bottlenecks, would attack. Alara was assigned to Vera's hunting party, which would take the Knife Ridge position. It was one of the most dangerous spots, a trail so narrow that wolves had to move single file, with a sheer drop on one side and a rock wall on the other. Perfect for an ambush. Also perfect for dying if anything went wrong. They reached the position by mid-afternoon and began preparations. Concealed positions behind rocks, rope traps set across the trail, backup routes mapped in case they needed to retreat. Vera pulled Alara aside as the sun started to set. "You understand what's going to happen tomorrow? We wait for them to come through. Then we attack." "We kill them," Vera corrected bluntly. "No mercy, no hesitation. They won't show us any. The moment they enter our kill zone, you strike fast and you strike to end it. Understood?" Alara's mouth was dry. "Understood. I've seen your training reports. You're competent with the blade, but not exceptional. So you don't try to be a hero. You stay with the group, you watch your assigned sector, and if someone breaks through, you defend yourself. Nothing fancy, just survive." "I can do that." "Good. Get some rest. We've got a long night ahead, and tomorrow's going to be hell." They took shifts sleeping in the concealed positions, always keeping someone on watch. Alara took the midnight shift, staring down the dark trail and imagining shadows that weren't there yet. Around 3 a.m., one of the scouts returned from the forward position, moving fast. They triggered the rock slide. Main pass is blocked. The rogues are splitting up. Looks like they're taking all 3 alternate routes. We've got maybe 4 hours before they reach our position. The camp exploded into quiet, controlled activity. Final checks on weapons. Last-minute adjustments to positions. Vera moved among them, offering brief words of encouragement or tactical reminders. "Remember," she told Ilara, "fear is normal. Use it. Let it sharpen your senses, but don't let it control you." Dawn came gray and cold. The world was eerily quiet except for the wind whistling through the rocks. Ilara crouched in her assigned position, sword in hand, and tried to control her breathing. She could hear them before she saw them, voices echoing off stone, the scrape of claws on rock. Then movement in the distance, shapes emerging from the morning mist. The rogues looked exactly as dangerous as their reputation suggested. Big, scarred, moving with the confidence of wolves who'd never lost a fight. They entered the narrow trail cautiously, spreading out as much as the terrain allowed. Vera gave the signal, a sharp whistle that sounded like a bird call. Then chaos erupted. Ropes snapped taut across the trail, catching the lead rogues and sending them sprawling. Arrows flew from concealed positions. Vera's hunting party descended from the rocks like avenging spirits, hitting the enemy from 3 sides at once. Ilara followed her training, staying with her group, moving when they moved. She blocked a strike from a rogue who'd broken through the first line. Her sword met his claws with a jarring impact that sent shock waves through her already bruised ribs. The rogue was bigger, stronger, more experienced, but Ilara had spent 2 months learning to fight through pain and exhaustion. She ducked under his neck swing, came up inside his guard, and drove her blade into his shoulder. He howled and staggered back. Before Ilara could press the advantage, another pack member finished him. "Keep moving," Vera shouted over the chaos. "Don't stop, don't engage unless you have to." The battle was brutal and fast. The narrow terrain worked exactly as planned. The rogues couldn't coordinate, couldn't use their numbers. They were forced to fight individually against a unified defense, but they were skilled and desperate. One of Vera's hunters went down, blood spraying from a throat wound. Another was knocked off the trail, his scream cutting off abruptly. Ilara's world narrowed to basics. Block, strike, move, don't think, don't hesitate, just survive. She didn't know how long the fight lasted. Minutes? Hours? Time lost meaning in the chaos of combat. Then, suddenly, it was over. The few remaining rogues were fleeing back the way they'd come, abandoning their wounded. Vera didn't order pursuit. Their job was defense, not vengeance. "Casualties?" she called out. 2 dead, 5 wounded, 3 seriously. The rogues had lost at least a dozen. Ilara stood in the aftermath, covered in blood, some hers, most not, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd fought. She'd survived. She'd killed, or at least contributed to killing, another wolf. She should feel something. Horror, guilt, triumph. But all she felt was numb. "Snowvale," Vera appeared at her side. "You did good. Stay with the wounded while we secure the area." Ilara nodded mechanically and moved to help. The next hours passed in a blur of tending injuries and waiting for word from the other ambush points. When the messenger finally arrived, the news was mixed. The ambush had worked. The rogue pack had been shattered. The survivors fleeing back north. But the cost had been high. 8 warriors dead, 20 wounded, and Kalen's team, which had taken the most heavily traveled alternate pass, had faced the worst of it. "The Alpha King?" Ilara asked, her voice tight. "Alive. Injured, but alive." Relief hit her so hard she almost collapsed. But there was no time to process it. They had to get back to Frostholm, get the wounded to proper medical care, secure the settlement in case the rogues regrouped. The return journey took twice as long with wounded to carry. By the time they reached Frostholm, night had fallen again. The settlement was a hive of activity, healers rushing to receive casualties, warriors securing perimeters, support staff preparing food and hot water for the returning fighters. Ilara helped carry a wounded hunter to the healer station, then immediately asked where Kalen was. "War room," Greta said without looking up from the soldier she was stitching. "Don't disturb him unless it's urgent." It wasn't urgent, it was necessary. Ilara found him in the war room, leaning over a map, blood-soaked bandages visible beneath his torn shirt. Kael and Thora were with him, discussing next steps. They all looked exhausted. "Ilara," Kalen said when he spotted her. His eyes swept over her, cataloging her injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious. You?" I'll live. He said something to Kale and Thora, then moved to meet her. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in every line of his face. I heard you did well. Vera was impressed. I survived. That's all. That's everything. He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of white hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it made her chest ache. I'm glad you're safe. We won, Alara said. You protected the pack. You should be celebrating. We won this fight, but victory comes with consequences. Kalen's expression darkened. The rogues were just the advance force. Their main camp is somewhere in the northern wilderness, and they know where we are now. This isn't over. It's just beginning. Before Alara could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Shouting, running footsteps. Mara burst into the war room, her face pale. Alpha King, the southern gate! You need to come now! They ran. Through the longhouse, across the courtyard to the main gates where a crowd was gathering. The gates swung open to reveal 3 figures standing in the torchlight. Alara's blood turned to ice. Her parents. And between them, in chains, was a young woman with white hair and terrified eyes. Alpha King Frostcrown, her father called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. We come bearing a gift, our youngest daughter, who we've kept safe all these years. We understand you have a preference for our family's unusual bloodline. We're offering her to you, in exchange for a place in your territory and protection from the lowland conflicts. The world tilted sideways. Alara stared at the chained girl, her sister, apparently, a sister she'd never known existed. An understanding crashed over her in a terrible wave. She'd never been their only child. She'd just been their first mistake. They'd locked her away and tried again, and this time they'd kept the white-haired daughter hidden carefully, saving her as a bargaining chip for exactly this kind of situation. You have another daughter. Alara's voice came out flat, emotionless, though inside she was screaming. Her mother finally looked at her directly for the first time since that day in the market. Alara, how unexpected to see you here. You locked me in a cellar for 23 years. Alara stepped forward, and the crowd parted for her. You sold me to a broker who would have shipped me to a labor camp, and the whole time you had another daughter, another white-haired daughter, and you were waiting for the right moment to use her, to profit from her. Her father had the audacity to look offended. We protected her. We kept her safe, fed, educated. Not like me? Alara was trembling now, but not with fear, with rage. Pure incandescent rage. You kept her as merchandise. You kept her until you could sell her to the highest bidder. How is that different from what you did to me? She has value, her mother said coldly. She's undamaged, trained, suitable for an Alpha King. You were always difficult, wrong somehow. We did what we had to do. The courtyard had gone completely silent. Every wolf in Frostholm was watching this confrontation unfold, waiting to see what would happen next. Kalen moved to stand beside Alara. When he spoke, his voice could have frozen the sun. You come to my territory after what you did to your daughter and expect me to reward you? We're offering you, Chad, you're offering me a chained, traumatized girl who you've kept prisoner her entire life, just like you did to Alara. Kalen's power rolled off him in waves. Here's my counteroffer. You leave, now. You take your chains and your cruelty, and you get out of my territory. If I ever see either of you again, I'll kill you myself. Lara's father's face went purple. You can't. I can do whatever I want. I'm the Alpha King. Now leave before I change my mind about letting you walk away. But Alara wasn't done. She walked forward until she was standing directly in front of her parents. Up close, she could see the fear beneath their bluster. They'd bet everything on this gambit, and it was failing. What's her name? Alara asked, looking at her chained sister. The daughter you actually bothered to name. Lissa, the girl whispered. She looked about 17, thin and pale and terrified. Lissa. Alara tested the name. Then she turned back to her parents. You're going to leave, just like the Alpha King said. But Lissa stays. She's packed now, just like me. And if you ever come back, if you ever try to hurt her or use her again, I will personally make sure you regret it. She's our daughter, her mother protested. No, she's your victim, but not anymore. Alara unsheathed her sword, still bloody from the battle, and cut through Lissa's chains with 2 precise strikes. "You're free. You can stay here with me, or you can leave, or you can do anything else you want, but you're not going with them. That's over now." Lissa stared at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. Then she threw herself into Alara's arms, sobbing. Alara held her sister, her baby sister, who she'd never known existed, while their parents stood there impotently. Finally, defeated and humiliated, they turned and left. The gates closed behind them with a final decisive thud. The courtyard erupted in approval. Wolves howled their support. Kael was actually smiling. Even Thora looked satisfied. But Alara barely heard it. She was focused on the trembling girl in her arms, on the weight of new responsibilities settling over her shoulders. She'd been given a second chance at life. Now she'd been given a chance to do for Lysa what no one had done for her until Kaelin. Give her freedom, give her hope, give her family. "Welcome to Frostholm," Alara whispered. "Welcome home." Lissa wouldn't let go. She clung to Alara like a drowning person clutching driftwood, her thin body racked with sobs that seemed too large for her frame. The crowd in the courtyard began to disperse, giving them space, though Alara could feel dozens of eyes still watching from windows and doorways. "Come on," Alara said gently, stroking her sister's white hair. "Let's get you inside. Get you warm." She guided Lissa toward the longhouse, Kaelin walking beside them in protective silence. Mara appeared from somewhere and led them to a room near Alara's, small but comfortable, already warmed by a fire someone had thoughtfully started. "I'll bring food," Mara said quietly, "and clean clothes. Looks like she's about your size, Alara." After Mara left, Alara helped Lissa sit on the bed. The girl's wrists were raw from the chains, her clothes were threadbare, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd been surviving rather than living. Alara recognized that look. She'd seen it in her reflection 2 months ago. "How long were you locked away?" Alara asked gently. "Not locked. Not like you." Lissa's voice was hoarse from crying. "They kept me in the house. Upstairs. I had a room, a bed. They fed me. But I couldn't leave. Couldn't go outside. Couldn't talk to anyone but them. They said it was to keep me safe, that the pack would hurt me if they knew about my hair. They lied. They were keeping you hidden so they could use you later. I know. I figured it out years ago. But there was nothing I could do." Lissa looked up at her sister, really looked at her. "I heard them talking about you sometimes. Late at night, when they thought I was asleep. About their first daughter, the one who died. Except you didn't die, did you?" "No. They locked me in a cellar from the time I was 2 until I was 23. Then they tried to sell me." Lissa's face crumpled again. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I'd known you were a child. It wasn't your responsibility." Alara took her sister's hands carefully, mindful of the raw wrists. "But you're here now. You're safe. And I promise you, Lysa, I promise, no one will ever lock you away again." Mara returned with food, clothes, and Greta in tow. The healer took one look at Lysa's wrists and made a disapproving noise. "Infected. These need cleaning and binding. Girl, when did you last eat?" "This morning, I think. Maybe yesterday." Lissa's sense of time seemed as fragmented as Alara's had been. Greta went to work with brisk efficiency while Mara laid out the food. Warm bread, stew, fruit. Lissa ate like she was afraid it would be taken away, stuffing food in her mouth until Alara gently slowed her down. "Easy. You'll make yourself sick. The food isn't going anywhere." After Greta finished with the bandages and Lissa had eaten her fill, exhaustion finally claimed the younger girl. She fell asleep sitting up, and Alara carefully helped her lie down and covered her with blankets. "She'll need time," Greta said quietly, "and watching. Malnutrition, possible infection, definitely psychological trauma. But she's young. She'll heal faster than you did." "Will she, though?" Alara asked. "Heal, I mean. Really heal?" "You did," Greta pointed out, "and you had it worse. So yes, I think she will, especially with you looking out for her." After Greta and Mara left, Alara stood by the door watching her sister sleep. The weight of responsibility settled over her shoulders like a physical thing. She'd barely figured out how to take care of herself. How was she supposed to take care of someone else? You're thinking too loud, Kaylin's voice came from the hallway. I can hear it from here. Alara stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind her. Kaylin was leaning against the wall, still in his blood-stained clothes, looking as exhausted as she felt. I don't know what I'm doing, Alara admitted, with her, with any of this. None of us do. We just figure it out as we go. He pushed off from the wall. You should rest. It's been a brutal couple of days. So should you. When's the last time you slept? Can't remember. He managed a tired smile. But I need to debrief with the council, check on the wounded, make sure the perimeter's secure. Sleep comes later. Kaylin? Alara stopped him with a hand on his arm. Thank you for what you said to them, to my parents. I should have said worse, should have done worse. His jaw tightened. The fact that they thought they could come here, offer me another daughter like some kind of prize after what they did to you. But they didn't get what they wanted, and Lissa's free. That's what matters. Alara hesitated, then rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Get some rest when you can. We still have that conversation to finish. She left him in the hallway and returned to her own room, where she finally allowed herself to collapse. Her ribs ached. Her muscles screamed. Her mind was spinning with images from the battle, from the confrontation with her parents, from Lissa's terrified face. But underneath all of it was something new, something that felt almost like strength. She'd faced her parents. She'd claimed her sister. She'd fought in a real battle and survived. She was building a life here, one painful step at a time, and no one could take that away from her. The next few days were chaos. The settlement was recovering from the battle, tending to the wounded and mourning the dead. Alara split her time between checking on Lissa, continuing her training with Kael, though at a reduced intensity due to her injuries, and helping wherever she could. Lissa was slowly emerging from her shell. She was quiet, watchful, clinging to Alara like a shadow at first. But gradually, she started to relax. Mara took her under her wing, showing her around the settlement. Finn taught her how to play a complicated card game that most of the younger wolves were obsessed with. Greta recruited her to help sort medical supplies, discovering that Lissa had a talent for organization and detail work. She's sharp, Greta reported to Alara after a week. Quick learner, good hands. If she's interested, I could train her as a healer's apprentice. Ask her, Alara said. Let it be her choice. When Alara presented the option, Lisa's eyes lit up. Really? I could learn medicine? If you want to, it's hard work, and Greta's a tough teacher, but yes, I want to. It was the first time Alara had seen genuine excitement on her sister's face. I want to help people. I want to do something that matters. Watching Lissa start to find her place in Frostholm stirred something complicated in Alara's chest. Pride, hope, and a fierce protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. But not everyone was happy about the new additions to the pack. Alara was walking back from training one afternoon when she overheard voices from behind one of the storage buildings. She recognized Garrett's distinctive growl. 2 albino omegas now, the Alpha Kings collecting them like trophies. It's unnatural. Keep your voice down, another voice hissed. If he hears you, I don't care if he hears me. Someone needs to say it. We just fought off a rogue attack, lost good wolves. And what's he focused on? A couple of cursed females who contribute nothing. Alara stepped around the corner. Contribute nothing? Garrett spun around, his expression twisting from surprise to hostility. His companions, 2 younger warriors, looked uncomfortable. You got something to say to me, Omega? I've got several things. First, I helped develop the strategy that won us that battle with minimal casualties. Second, my sister is training to be a healer, a role this pack desperately needs more of. Third, you lost your fight with me and got suspended from the warriors for harassment, so maybe think twice before you call anyone useless. Garrett's face went red. I wasn't fighting seriously. If I had been, I'd be dead, probably. I know, Alara kept her voice level. But you weren't trying to kill me. You were trying to humiliate me, and you failed, so here we are. One of Garrett's companions actually snickered. Garrett rounded on him furiously, and Alara took the opportunity to walk away before the situation could escalate. But the encounter left her unsettled. Garrett wasn't the only one who felt that way. She'd sensed the undercurrent of resentment from certain quarters of the pack. The older wolves, mostly, The ones who'd been raised on the same superstitions that had condemned Alara and Lissa in the first place. She mentioned it to Kaylin that evening during one of their increasingly frequent stolen moments together. They were sitting on the wall overlooking the valley, watching the sun set behind the western peaks. "Garrett's an idiot," Kaylin said bluntly. "But he's not wrong that some pack members are uncomfortable with the changes." "Changes? You and Lissa are the most visible, but you're not the only ones. Since I took over the Northern Territories, I've been accepting wolves that other packs rejected. Omegas who were too outspoken, betas who didn't fit the mold. Anyone who could pull their weight and follow pack law, regardless of background." He traced patterns on the stone wall between them. "It's created tension with the traditionalists. They think I'm weakening the pack by prioritizing loyalty over bloodlines." "Are you? Weakening it, I mean." "No, I'm strengthening it. A pack built on fear and tradition alone is brittle. It breaks under pressure. But a pack built on choice, on wolves who genuinely want to be here, that's unbreakable." He looked at her. "You're proof of that. You chose to stay. You chose to fight. You didn't have to, but you did. That kind of loyalty is worth more than a dozen warriors who are only here because they were born into it." Pretty speech. Does the council agree? Most of them. Thora's still skeptical, but she's coming around. Kael's fully on board. He says you're one of his most determined students, which from him is high praise. Vera thinks you've got tactical instincts that could be developed further. Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. "Really? Really?" Kaylin shifted closer, his shoulder pressing against hers. "You've impressed people, Alara, earned their respect. Even the ones who were skeptical at first are starting to see what I saw from the beginning." "What's that?" "That you're extraordinary." The word hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Alara turned to look at him and found him already looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "We should have that conversation," she said quietly. "The one we keep putting off." "Probably." But neither of them moved. "Alara, I need you to understand something. As Alpha King, my choices affect the entire pack. If this becomes official, it'll have political ramifications. Some pack members will see it as favoritism. Others will question my judgment. It could make things harder for you. Things are already hard. I can handle harder. You shouldn't have to handle it alone. I won't be alone. I'll have you." She reached out and took his hand, threading their fingers together. His hand was warm and calloused and steady. "Unless you're having second thoughts?" "No second thoughts? No doubts." He raised their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. "But I want you to be sure. You've been through so much. I don't want to be another thing that complicates your life. You're not a complication. You're the reason I have a life to complicate." Alara leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm sure, Kaylin, I've never been more sure of anything." They sat together as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged one by one across the vast northern sky. Below them, Frostholm was settling in for the night, lights appearing in windows, the sounds of pack life drifting up on the cold air. "There's a formal gathering next week," Kaylin said eventually. "The council wants to acknowledge the warriors who distinguished themselves in the battle. It's also when we'll officially recognize new pack members who've completed their probation period." "Lissa's only been here 2 weeks." "I wasn't talking about Lissa." He pulled back to look at her. "Your 3-month probation ended yesterday. You completed Kyle's training program. You fought in a real battle. You've contributed to pack strategy and demonstrated loyalty repeatedly. The council voted unanimously to grant you full pack membership." Alara's throat tightened. "They did?" "Even Thora voted yes. She said, and I quote, 'The girl's got spine. I'll give her that.'" Kaylin smiled. "At the gathering, you'll take the pack oath and receive your marks. You'll officially be one of us." "I already feel like one of you." "I know, but this makes it formal, official. No one can question your place here ever again." He stood and pulled her up with him. "Come on, it's getting cold and you need rest. Big day coming up." They walked back to the longhouse together, still holding hands, not caring who saw. At her door, Kaylin paused. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you. Everything you've overcome, everything you've achieved, you should be proud too." After he left, Alara checked on Lissa and found her already asleep, curled up with a medical text that Greta had lent her. Her sister looked peaceful, young, like she might actually get to have the childhood she'd been denied. Alara returned to her own room and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Full pack membership, official recognition, it felt surreal. 3 months ago, she'd been a prisoner being sold in a back alley market. Now she was about to become a formal member of the most powerful pack in the North. The gathering was held in the main hall, which had been decorated with banners and torches for the occasion. The entire pack assembled: warriors, hunters, craftspeople, healers, everyone. Alara stood near the front with the other wolves, being formally recognized, trying not to fidget. Lissa was in the crowd, watching with wide eyes. Mara gave Alara an encouraging smile. Kale nodded once, which from him was practically a standing ovation. Kalen stood before them in his formal role as Alpha King, commanding and powerful. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall. We gather tonight to honor those who have proven themselves worthy of this pack, who have demonstrated strength, loyalty, and courage in the face of adversity. We recognize warriors who distinguish themselves in battle, defending our home against those who would destroy it. And we welcome new members who have completed their trials and earned their place among us. He went through the warriors first, acknowledging their achievements, presenting them with honors and increased rank. Then he turned to the new members, 5 wolves, including Alara, all of whom had completed various probation periods. Alara Snowveal, sis, Kalen called her forward. You came to us from circumstances I will not detail here, as they are your story to tell. But in the 3 months since your arrival, you have trained relentlessly, despite physical limitations. You contributed strategic insights that saved lives in our recent battle. You fought alongside seasoned warriors and held your position. And you demonstrated compassion and strength when confronted with a painful past. The Council has voted unanimously to grant you full membership in the Frostholm Pack. Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding. The crowd was silent, watching. Do you swear loyalty to this pack above all others? Kalen asked formally. I do. Do you swear to defend your packmates with your life, if necessary? I do. Do you swear to uphold our laws and contribute your skills for the good of the community? I do. Then by the authority vested in me as Alpha King, I declare you a full member of the Frostholm Pack. Welcome home, Alara Snowveal. The hall erupted in howls of approval. Wolves beat their fists on tables, stamped their feet, created a cacophony of support that washed over Alara like a physical force. Vera stepped forward with a small wooden box. Inside were 2 silver cuffs engraved with the mountain symbol of Frostholm. Kalen took them and fastened one around each of Alara's wrists. Pack marks, he explained quietly, his hands lingering on hers. You're one of us now, officially, permanently. Alara looked down at the cuffs gleaming on her wrists, the wrists that had once been empty and helpless, and felt something break open inside her chest. Not pain. Something else. Something that might have been joy. She looked up at Kalen, and what she saw in his eyes made the rest of the hall fall away. Pride. Affection. Something deeper that neither of them had put words to yet. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. You earned this. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. The other new members took their oaths. Kalen made closing remarks about unity and strength. Then the formal gathering transitioned into a celebration, with food and drink and music. Alara was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. Finn hugged her enthusiastically. Mara presented her with a new training outfit. Even some of the older wolves who'd been skeptical came forward to offer congratulations. Lissa pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around Alara. You did it! You're really packed now! So will you be when you're ready? I want to be like you, Lissa said earnestly. Strong and brave, and you already are those things. You just haven't realized it yet. As the celebration continued, Alara found herself being pulled into conversations, sharing food with wolves she'd trained alongside, laughing at jokes she actually understood. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Not as a prisoner, not as a burden, but as an equal. Later in the evening, she stepped outside for air. The courtyard was quieter, just a few wolves scattered around, enjoying the night. Kalen found her there, as she'd somehow known he would. Hiding? He asked. Breathing. It's a lot in there. Too much? No, just intense. Good intense. She looked up at the stars. I keep waiting to wake up, for this to all be a dream. It's real. He moved to stand beside her. Elara, about earlier. About us. I meant what I said, but I want to be clear about something. Her heart rate picked up. What? In our culture, when an Alpha King chooses a mate, it's not just a personal decision. It affects pack dynamics, political alliances, succession planning. If we formalize this, if we become official, you'd be taking on responsibilities beyond just being my partner. You'd be pack leadership, second in command. The wolves would look to you for guidance, for decisions. That's a lot of pressure. Are you trying to talk me out of this? No, I'm making sure you understand what you're agreeing to. His expression was serious. I don't want you to feel trapped again, even in a different way. Elara thought about that carefully. 3 months ago, the idea of being responsible for anything beyond her own survival would have terrified her. But she'd changed, grown, discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known existed. I won't feel trapped, she said finally. I'll feel trusted. You're asking me to stand beside you, not behind you. To be a partner, not a possession. That's not a cage, Kaylin. That's a choice. My choice. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, hope, love maybe, though that was a word that still felt too big to speak out loud. Then I'm asking, he said quietly. Officially, Elara Snowveal, will you stand beside me? As my mate, as pack leadership, as my partner in all things? The question hung in the cold air between them. Inside the hall, the celebration continued. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the moon, and Elara stood on the wall of Frostholm, looking at the man who'd bought her freedom and helped her claim her strength, and knew that her answer would change everything. But she'd stopped being afraid of change. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. Kaylin's smile was brilliant enough to rival the stars. He pulled her close and kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Just certainty and heat and the promise of a future that belonged to them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kaylin rested his forehead against hers. We'll announce it tomorrow. Give you tonight to be sure. I'm sure. Announce it now. Now? Why wait? Everyone's already here. Let's tell them. He laughed, delighted. You're fearless. You know that? No. Just done being afraid. They walked back into the hall together, hand in hand. The crowd noticed and conversations began to die down, wolves sensing that something significant was about to happen. Kaylin raised his voice. Pack, I have an announcement. The hall fell silent. Tonight we welcome new members and honored warriors. We celebrated our strength and unity. And now, I'm asking you to celebrate something more. He pulled Elara closer to his side. Elara Snowveal has agreed to become my mate and stand beside me as pack leadership. She will be your second alpha, your advocate, and your voice in leadership decisions. I ask for your acceptance and support as we move forward together. For a heartbeat, the hall was completely silent. Elara held her breath, waiting for objections, for protest, for someone to stand up and say this was wrong. Then Kael stood up. About time, he said gruffly. Anyone could see you two were circling each other for weeks. Congratulations. Vera raised her cup. To the Alpha King and his mate, may they lead us to continued strength. To the Alpha Pair, the hall roared back, and suddenly everyone was cheering, howling approval, celebrating this new development with the same enthusiasm they'd shown for the battle victory. Lissa was crying happy tears. Mara was grinning like she'd planned this all along. Even Thora, stern and unyielding Thora, gave a sharp nod of approval. Elara looked around at the sea of accepting faces, at the pack that had become her family, and felt that thing in her chest bloom into something too big to contain. 3 months ago, she'd been nothing, a ghost in a cellar, forgotten and discarded. Now she was standing in a hall full of wolves who'd chosen to accept her, beside a man who'd seen her at her weakest and helped her become strong, with a sister she was protecting instead of being protected from. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, building, becoming. The girl from the cellar was gone forever, left behind in the darkness where she belonged. In her place stood Alara Snowveal, warrior of Frostholm, mate to the Alpha King, and living proof that sometimes the thing everyone calls cursed turns out to be the greatest strength of all. The celebration lasted until dawn, but Alara and Kaelin slipped away long before that, stealing moments alone in the quiet corridors of the Longhouse. They talked for hours about their pasts, their hopes, the challenges ahead. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Alara fell asleep in Kaelin's quarters for the first time, curled against his chest, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. She woke to winter sunlight streaming through the window and Kaelin already dressed, studying reports at his desk. He looked up when he heard her stir. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "How do you feel?" "Like everything changed overnight." She sat up, pulling the blankets around her shoulders. "Is that normal? For someone who just became second alpha of the Northern Territories?" "Yes, that's normal." He set down the reports and came to sit beside her on the bed. "We need to talk about what happens next. There's a lot to prepare for." "Such as?" "Training, for one. You'll need to learn pack law in detail, dispute resolution, resource management, defensive strategy at a leadership level. You'll also need combat training beyond what Kael's taught you. As second alpha, you're a target for anyone who wants to weaken the pack." Alara's stomach nodded. "You make it sound overwhelming." "It is overwhelming, but you don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to do it all at once." He took her hand. "Alara, I need you to understand something. Last night, when I asked you to stand beside me, I meant it literally. Not behind me. Not as a figurehead. As an equal partner in leadership. That means your voice carries the same weight as mine in pack decisions. It also means the pack will challenge you, question you, test you. They need to know you're strong enough for the position." "More tests? Great. It never really ends. Leadership is just one continuous test." He smiled slightly. "But I've seen you face down your parents, survive a battle, and stand up to Garrett when most wolves would have run. You can handle this." Over the following weeks, Alara discovered that Kaelin's warnings hadn't been exaggerated. Her days became a grueling schedule of training, study, and practical leadership experience. Mornings were still with Kael, but now focused on advanced combat techniques, how to fight multiple opponents, how to defend while injured, how to use terrain and weather to her advantage. Afternoons were spent with various council members, learning the intricacies of pack management. Thora taught her resource allocation, showing her how to balance food stores, medical supplies, and weapons production to keep the pack running through harsh winters. Vera trained her in wilderness survival beyond basic tracking, how to read weather patterns, how to find water in frozen landscapes, how to build emergency shelters. Mara schooled her in pack politics and diplomacy, the delicate balance of maintaining alliances with neighboring territories while protecting Frostholm's independence. And through it all, Lissa was finding her own path. Under Greta's demanding tutelage, she was proving to be a natural healer, steady hands, sharp mind, and a calm demeanor that put injured wolves at ease. Alara would sometimes watch her sister work and feel a fierce pride that still surprised her. One evening, about a month after the ceremony, Alara was in Kaelin's quarters reviewing territorial maps when urgent knocking interrupted them. "Alpha King!" It was one of the gate guards, breathless. "We have visitors from the Shadowpine pack." Alara's blood ran cold. Shadowpine, her birth pack, the pack that had let her parents lock her away for 23 years. Kaelin's expression hardened. "How many?" "5. They're carrying negotiation flags, not weapons. They're asking for a meeting with you, and—" He hesitated. "And with Alara Snowveal specifically." "It's a trap," Alara said immediately. "It has to be. Maybe. Or maybe they've heard about your position here and want to leverage it somehow." Kaelin stood, already shifting into his Alpha King persona. "Either way, we meet them. But on our terms, in our territory, with our pack watching. They can't hurt you here, Alara. I promise." They assembled in the main hall with the full council present. The Shadowpine delegation was led by their alpha, a grizzled man named Marcus, who Alara vaguely remembered from her early childhood. With him were 4 senior pack members, all looking uncomfortable in Frostholm's imposing hall. "Alpha King Frostcrown," Marcus began formally. "Thank you for seeing us. You asked for this meeting. State your business." Kalen's voice was ice. "We've come about a matter of pack honor and restitution." Marcus's eyes found Alara, and she saw shame there, genuine shame. "We've learned the truth about Alara Snowveil, about what her parents did, about the years she spent imprisoned while our pack looked the other way." "You didn't just look the other way," Alara said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "You believed the lie. You mourned a child who wasn't dead and never questioned whether she might still be alive and suffering." "You're right, and we were wrong." Marcus took a breath. "When your parents tried to sell your sister to the Alpha King, word spread. Wolves started talking, asking questions. We investigated the Snowveil household and found evidence, the cellar, the trapdoor, signs of long-term habitation. We confronted your parents, and they confessed everything." "Confessed?" Lissa's voice came from where she stood beside Greta. "They admitted it." "Under pressure, yes. They claimed they were protecting you from pack judgment, that they thought they were doing the right thing." Marcus shook his head. "It was a weak defense, and the pack didn't accept it. We exiled them both. They're rogues now, stripped of pack protection and territory rights." Alara should have felt satisfaction at that news. Instead, she just felt empty. "Why are you here? What do you want from us?" "We want to make amends. We failed you catastrophically. We allowed a child to suffer because we were too bound by superstition to question the story we were told." Marcus pulled out a leather document case. "The Shadowpine Pack formally acknowledges its failure to protect one of its members. We offer restitution in the form of territory, resources, and a formal alliance with the Northern Territories. We also offer our apology, though we know it's insufficient." "You're right. It is insufficient." Kalen's voice cut like a blade. "You come here with territory and resources, thinking that can erase 23 years of torture? You think that makes things even? No, nothing can make things even, but it's what we can offer." Marcus looked directly at Alara. "The final decision is yours. The pack voted unanimously that whatever judgment you pass, we'll accept it. If you want revenge, we'll submit to it. If you want nothing to do with us, we'll honor that. If you want to take everything we're offering and more, it's yours." Every eye in the hall turned to Alara. The weight of that attention was crushing. They were giving her power over the pack that had failed her, the pack whose negligence had enabled her parents' cruelty. She could destroy them, take their territory, strip their resources, leave them weak and vulnerable. Part of her, the part that still remembered the darkness of the cellar, wanted exactly that. But another part of her, the part that had been growing stronger every day in Frostholm, recognized something in Marcus's shame-filled eyes. The same thing she'd seen in her own reflection when she first arrived here. The weight of failures that couldn't be undone, only moved forward from. "I don't want revenge," Alara said finally, "and I don't want your territory or resources as payment for what happened to me. That's not how this works." Marcus looked confused. "Then what do you want?" "I want change, real change." Alara stood, moving to stand beside Kalen. "I want the Shadowpine Pack to formally denounce the superstitions about white-haired wolves. I want it written into your pack law that no wolf can be imprisoned, hidden, or harmed because of their appearance. I want you to create safeguards, checks on families, regular welfare visits, something, so that what happened to me and Lysa can never happen to another child in your territory." "Done," Marcus said immediately. "All of it. We've already started implementing similar measures, but we'll make them official pack law. And I want an alliance. Not as restitution, but as equals. The Northern Territories and Shadowpine working together to create a network where outcasts and different wolves have safe places to go. Where they're protected, not punished." She could feel Kalen's pride radiating beside her. This was leadership, not vengeance, not petty satisfaction, but using power to create lasting change. "We accept those terms," Marcus said, "and we thank you for your mercy." "It's not mercy, it's accountability." Alara's voice was firm. "You failed me. Now do better for the next generation. That's all I ask." After the Shadowpine delegation left, having signed formal documents establishing the alliance and the new laws, the hall buzzed with conversation. Several council members approached Alara to express approval of how she'd handled the situation. "That was well done," Thora said grudgingly. "You could have crushed them, but instead you used the opportunity to create meaningful change. That's the mark of a good leader." Even Garrett, who'd been avoiding Alara since the confrontation weeks ago, approached her after the meeting. "I was wrong about you," he said without preamble. "I thought you were weak. Thought you didn't belong here. But what you just did in there, that took more strength than any fight I've ever won. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Alara studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. "Apology accepted. Just don't make me regret it." He shook her hand firmly. "I won't." That night, lying beside Kaylin in the darkness, Alara tried to process everything that had happened. Did I make the right choice with Shadowpine? There's no such thing as one right choice, but you made a choice that aligns with your values and creates positive change. That's all any leader can do. What if they don't follow through? What if they sign the documents but nothing really changes? Then we hold them accountable. That's what the alliance is for, mutual support and mutual responsibility. Kaylin pulled her closer. But I think they will follow through. Marcus seemed genuinely ashamed. Sometimes shame can be a powerful motivator for change. I wanted to hate them. Part of me still does. That's human, natural. You're allowed to hate them and still choose to work with them. Emotions don't have to dictate actions. Winter deepened into the harsh season that tested every northern pack's survival. Temperatures dropped so low that water froze in seconds. Snow piled so high that the settlement's walls were barely visible. Hunting became nearly impossible, and the pack relied on stored provisions and careful rationing. This was when Alara's training truly paid off. She worked alongside Kaylin to manage resources, resolve disputes over food allocation, and maintain morale during the darkest months. She learned to make hard decisions, like reducing rations across the board rather than cutting off the weakest members, and organizing mandatory training rotations to keep everyone active despite the cold. She also discovered she had a talent for identifying problems before they became crises. Small tensions between pack members that could escalate into violence. Supply issues that needed addressing before stores ran out. Vulnerabilities in their defenses that needed reinforcing. "You're a natural at this," Kaylin told her one evening after she'd successfully mediated a dispute between two families over shared resources. "Better than I was at this stage. I had a good teacher. You have good instincts. There's a difference." Lissa was thriving despite the harsh winter. She'd become Greta's most trusted apprentice, and when a flu outbreak swept through the settlement, she worked around the clock to help treat the sick. Alara would see her sister moving through the healer's station with quiet confidence, and barely recognize the terrified girl who'd arrived in chains months ago. One night, Lissa came to find Alara in her quarters. "Can we talk?" "Of course. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Lissa sat down, fidgeting with her sleeves. "I wanted to thank you for everything, for saving me, for bringing me here, for showing me what I could become. You did that yourself. I just gave you the opportunity." "No, you gave me everything." Lissa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I was so scared when they brought me to that market. I thought my life was over. And then you were there, and you fought for me, and you brought me to this place where I matter, where I can help people, where I'm not just the cursed white-haired girl locked in an upstairs room." Alara pulled her sister into a hug. "You were never cursed. You were always extraordinary. You just needed the chance to prove it." "So were you, are you?" Lissa pulled back. "Greta says I'll be ready for my healer's certification by spring. She says I'm one of the fastest learners she's ever had. I'm proud of you, so proud. I want to be like you when I grow up." "Lissa, you're already better than me. You're kind, compassionate, skilled at something that actually helps people. Don't wish to be like me. Just be yourself. That's more than enough." As winter finally began to yield to early spring, a new challenge emerged. Word reached Frostholm that several smaller packs in the region were struggling, their territories ravaged by the same rogue attacks that had hit Frostholm months ago. They were sending out desperate calls for help, for alliance, for anything that might help them survive. The council debated the issue for days. Some members argued that Frostholm should focus on its own survival and not overextend. Others felt that helping weaker packs would build valuable alliances and strengthen the region overall. Alara listened to both sides, then spoke up. "We should help them. Not because it's easy or safe, but because it's right. We have the resources, the strength, the strategic position. If we let these packs fall, the rogues will grow stronger. They'll control more territory. Eventually, they'll come back here, and we'll be fighting a much larger force. That's a risk assessment, not a moral argument, Thora pointed out. It's both. We help because it's tactically smart and because it's the right thing to do. These packs are suffering the same attacks we defended against. We have knowledge, strategies, experience. We share that. We create alliances. We make the entire region stronger. Everyone wins. Kaylin was watching her with undisguised pride. What exactly are you proposing? A defensive coalition. We offer military training, strategic support, and emergency supplies to packs that commit to mutual defense agreements. We teach them the mountain ambush strategies that worked for us. We help them fortify their territories. In exchange, they agree to support each other, and us, if anyone is attacked. We turn this region from a collection of vulnerable individual packs into a unified defensive network. The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than dismissive. It would require significant resources, Vera said slowly. Training teams, supply shipments, ongoing coordination. But it would also create a buffer zone around our territory, Kyle added. Stronger neighbors means better security for us. And it establishes Frostholm as a regional leader, Thora said. That has political value beyond the immediate military benefits. The council voted, and Alara's proposal passed with a strong majority. Over the following months, Alara found herself traveling to neighboring territories with small teams of trainers and advisors. She taught the mountain ambush strategy that had saved Frostholm. She helped packs identify and fortify defensive positions. She mediated disputes and negotiated alliance terms. And everywhere she went, wolves stared at her white hair and pale eyes. But instead of fear or suspicion, she saw curiosity, respect, even admiration. The cursed albino had become a symbol of strength and innovative thinking. The Omega who'd been sold in a market was now advising pack alphas on military strategy. The girl from the cellar was reshaping regional politics. It was during one of these trips to a small pack called Riverbend that had been devastated by rogue attacks that Alara encountered her parents. She was inspecting defensive positions on Riverbend's eastern border when she caught their scent on the wind, familiar and unwelcome, triggering memories she'd been trying to move past. They emerged from the tree line cautiously, looking thin and haggard. Rogues without pack protection struggled to survive, especially in winter. Her father had a fresh scar across his face. Her mother looked years older than she should. "Alara," her father said hoarsely, "we need to talk to you." The Riverbend warriors with Alara immediately moved to intercept, but she held up a hand. "It's fine, I know them. Give us a moment." After the warriors retreated to a respectful distance, Alara faced her parents. She felt none of the rage or pain she'd expected, just a cold, detached curiosity. "What do you want?" "We're starving," her mother said bluntly. "Winter was brutal. We barely survived. We've heard about what you've become, the Alpha King's mate, the second leader of the Northern Territories. We hoped, maybe you could help us." "Help you?" Alara's voice was flat. "You locked me in a cellar for 23 years. You sold me. You kept Lissa prisoner as a bargaining chip, and now you want my help." "We made mistakes," her father said. "We admit that, but we're your parents. We raised you. You imprisoned me. There's a difference." "Please," her mother's voice cracked. "We're desperate. We'll die out here without pack protection. You're powerful now. You could sponsor us into a pack. Give us a chance to start over." Alara looked at them, really looked at them. They were pathetic, broken, reduced to begging from the daughter they'd discarded like garbage. She could help them. She had the power to grant them the mercy they'd never shown her. Or she could walk away and let nature take its course. The old Alara, the one who'd survived in darkness by clinging to hope and humanity, would have helped them, would have found some pack willing to take them in, given them food and supplies, sent them on their way with a chance at survival. But she wasn't that Alara anymore. She'd evolved past the girl who thought she had to forgive everyone who hurt her. "No," she said simply. "You made your choices. You live with the consequences, or die with them. I don't care which." "Alara, please. You don't get to say my name. You lost that right the day you locked me in that cellar." She turned her back on them. "Leave. Now! If I see you again, I'll have you arrested as hostile rogues. This is your only warning." She walked away without looking back. Behind her, she could hear her mother sobbing, her father trying to argue, but their voices faded into the background noise of the forest, and then into nothing at all. When she returned to the Riverbend camp, the warriors were watching her carefully. "Everything all right, Second Alpha?" one asked. "Everything's fine. Just dealing with some old ghosts." She looked at the defensive plan spread across the planning table. "Now, let's talk about reinforcing your northern approach." That night, she sent a message to Kaylin via one of the fast runners that connected the territories. "Encountered parents. Sent them away. I'm fine. Home in 3 days." His response came back within hours. "Proud of you. Safe travels. I love you." It was the first time either of them had said those words, even in writing. Alara read the message 3 times, feeling warmth spread through her chest despite the cold mountain air. "I love you too," she wrote back. "See you soon." The defensive coalition took most of the spring and summer to fully establish, but by the time the first snow of the new winter began to fall, 8 packs had joined. They'd created communication networks, shared defensive strategies, established supply chains, and conducted joint training exercises. And when a new rogue force tried to attack one of the coalition packs, they were met not by a single vulnerable target, but by a coordinated response from 3 packs simultaneously. The rogues were crushed, their leadership captured, their survivors scattered. Word spread quickly through the region. The Northern Coalition was not to be challenged. The packs that had once been weak and vulnerable were now strong and unified. And at the center of it all was Frostholm, with its White Alpha King and his equally formidable mate. On the first anniversary of Alara's arrival at Frostholm, the pack held a celebration. The main hall was decorated, food was plentiful, and wolves from allied packs had traveled to attend. Alara stood beside Kaylin at the head of the hall, looking out at the gathered faces. She saw Lysa laughing with other young healers, confident and capable. She saw Kael teaching combat techniques to visitors. She saw Vera coordinating with allied hunters. She saw Mara holding court with pack elders from 3 different territories. And she saw dozens of wolves who'd been outcasts like her, the misfit, the different, the rejected, who'd found home and purpose here in Frostholm. White-haired wolves were no longer a rarity in the settlement. 2 had arrived in the last month alone, drawn by stories of the place where appearance didn't matter. "What are you thinking?" Kaylin asked quietly. "I'm thinking about how far we've come. How much has changed." "You changed it. You and your ideas about coalition and alliance and protecting the vulnerable. We changed it together." She squeezed his hand. "I never could have done this alone." "Neither could I. That's the point of partnership." He raised his voice to address the crowd. "Pack, allies, we gather tonight to celebrate not just the anniversary of One Wolf's arrival, but the transformation of our entire region. A year ago, we were isolated packs barely surviving against rogue attacks and harsh conditions. Now we stand as a unified coalition, stronger together than we ever were apart." The crowd roared approval. This transformation was driven by the vision of one wolf who refused to accept that survival meant isolation, who believed that strength comes from unity, not from standing alone. Kaylin turned to Alara. "My mate, my partner, my equal in all things. The wolf who was once called cursed and is now the foundation of our greatest achievement." Alara felt her face flush as the crowd's approval grew louder. She wasn't used to being the center of positive attention, even after a year. But then she looked out at those faces again and realized something. They weren't cheering because she was special or extraordinary. They were cheering because she represented possibility. She was living proof that being different, being broken, being discarded didn't mean being worthless. Every outcast in that room saw themselves in her, and every one of them now believed they could be more than what their birth packs had told them they were. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice carrying through the hall. "But I'm not special. I just refuse to stay in the cage they put me in. And if I can do that, if I can go from a cellar prisoner to standing here tonight, then any of you can become whatever you choose to be. That's the real strength of this coalition, not our military power or our resources. It's the fact that we give wolves a choice about their futures. We give them freedom." The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Alara and Kaylin slipped away to the quiet of the settlement walls. They stood looking out over the valley, watching the moonlight paint the snow silver. "I've been thinking," Kaylin said, "about succession. about the future. That's ominous. Not ominous, practical. He turned to face her. We're building something that needs to last beyond us. The coalition, the alliance, the safe haven for outcasts. It needs to be formalized, codified, protected. You want to write it all down. Make it official pack law that survives leadership changes. Exactly. And I want you to lead that effort. You understand better than anyone why these protections are necessary. You've lived the consequences of not having them. Alara thought about that. About creating laws that would protect wolves like her and Lissa for generations to come. About building something permanent from the pain of her past. I'll do it, she said, but not alone. We gather input from the coalition packs, from the outcasts who've joined us, from everyone this affects. Make it truly representative. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the settlement below. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, not in challenge or threat, but in pure joy. Others joined in, creating a harmony that echoed off the mountain peaks. Do you ever miss it? Kaylin asked softly. Your old pack? The life you would have had if things had been different? No. The answer came without hesitation. That life would have been built on lies and hiding. This life, hard as it is built on truth, on choice, on being exactly who I am without apology. She leaned into him. I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not even for an easier path? One without battles and politics and constant challenges? Especially not for an easier path. Easy doesn't make you strong. Struggle does. Pain does. Overcoming does. She looked up at him. You taught me that. You and everyone else here who refused to let me quit when things got hard. You taught yourself. We just gave you the space to learn. Spring arrived again, bringing with it new life and new challenges. The coalition formalized into the Northern Alliance with written treaties and shared governance. Alara's protection laws were adopted by all member packs, with enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance. And on a warm day in late spring, when the snow had finally melted and green was returning to the valley, Lissa completed her healer's certification. The entire pack gathered to witness Greta formally recognize her youngest apprentice as a full healer of Frostholm. Alara stood in the crowd, trying not to cry and failing completely. Her baby sister, the terrified girl who'd arrived in chains, was now a certified healer, respected and valued, with a bright future ahead of her. After the ceremony, Lissa found Alara and hugged her fiercely. Thank you for everything, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You never needed me to believe in you. You just needed permission to believe in yourself. Alara pulled back and looked at her sister. I'm so proud of you, Lissa. So incredibly proud. I'm going to stay here, Lissa said, in Frostholm. Build my life here. Is that okay? It's more than okay. It's perfect. That evening, as the celebration wound down, Alara found herself back on the wall overlooking the valley. It had become her favorite spot, the place where she could see everything she'd helped build. Kaylin found her there, as he always did. Thinking deep thoughts? He asked. Thinking about how strange life is. How you can go from having nothing to having everything in the space of a year and a half. You didn't have nothing. You always had yourself, your strength, your determination, your refusal to give up. He put his arm around her shoulders. All of this, the coalition, the alliance, the safe haven we've built, it existed inside you all along. You just needed the opportunity to let it out. That's very poetic for a warrior king. I have hidden depths. She laughed. You really don't. You're about as subtle as a landslide. And yet you love me anyway. I really do. She turned to kiss him. Even when you're being insufferably philosophical on top of walls at sunset. Noted. I'll try to be more insufferable next time. They stood together as the sun set behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Below them, Frostholm was settling in for the evening, lights appearing in windows, the sounds of pack life drifting up on the warm air. Somewhere in the settlement, Lissa was probably organizing medical supplies with the same intense focus she brought to everything. Kael was running evening training drills. Mara was likely negotiating some new alliance term. Vera was planning tomorrow's hunt. And in that hall, in that settlement, in that coalition of packs, Hundreds of wolves who'd been rejected and abandoned and told they were worthless had found home, because one girl who'd spent 23 years in a cellar had refused to stay there, had refused to accept that her prison defined her future, had chosen to fight, to grow, to become something more than the curse everyone said she was. The girl from the cellar was gone, left behind in the darkness where she belonged. In her place stood Alara Snowveal, warrior, leader, mate to the Alpha King, and living proof that the thing everyone called cursed could become the greatest strength of all. She'd been sold like livestock. She'd been called a mistake, a burden, a curse. But she'd survived. She'd fought. She'd won. And in winning, she'd changed everything. "What are you smiling about?" Kaylin asked. "Just thinking about how wrong they all were. My parents, the pack that rejected me, everyone who saw my white hair and decided I was worthless. They were catastrophically wrong. They were. And I'm glad they'll spend the rest of their lives knowing it." She squeezed his hand. "Come on, let's go inside. It's getting cold, and I believe someone promised me dinner." "I did no such thing." "Then I'm promising you dinner. And you're cooking." "Since when do I cook?" "Since right now. Consider it leadership training. If you can command armies, you can figure out how to make stew." He laughed, that deep, genuine laugh that she loved, and let her pull him toward the longhouse. Behind them, the stars began to emerge one by one across the darkening sky. The northern territories stretched out in every direction, harsh, beautiful, unforgiving, and alive. And at its heart was Frostholm, a place where different didn't mean less, where strength was measured not by bloodlines, but by character, where outcasts became family and the cursed became queens. Alara had started with nothing, less than nothing. She'd been a ghost, a prisoner, a thing her own parents wanted to erase, but she'd refused to stay erased. She'd fought for every inch of ground, every moment of freedom, every piece of the life she'd built. And now she stood at the center of something magnificent. Not because she was special or extraordinary or blessed, but because she'd refused to give up. Because she'd chosen to believe that she deserved more than the cage they'd put her in. Because she'd been brave enough to fight for the life she wanted instead of accepting the one she'd been given. The girl who'd been hidden from the sun had become the light that guided outcasts home. And she was just getting started.